Oh, girls like serial killers and they want to be told what to do and abused all the time. That's what this tells us. You know, that is what a bad boy is like in real life, like Justin Wattpad Waller. Please, get away from me. Women, what do they want? Who are they? Who are women? What do they look like? The whole point of these stories is that the power dynamic has completely shifted by the end. Women don't need to be physically strong to be powerful, and if you really thought about it, you would know that. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome if this is your first time here. So, I felt it necessary to film a little introduction to give some context and just explain a little bit what you are about to see, because this video kind of happened purely by accident. So a little while ago, I watched The Hunger Games, A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, and that review of the movie is up on my channel. I will link it somewhere here. And as part of that, as I was scripting it, I ended up going on a huge, long discussion, let's say, about bad boys and why they're appealing, why women might find them attractive, what's going on there, and also delving into areas I've gone into before, connecting that to certain narratives that, let's say, the RedPill, to use the broadest terms possible, will take that and then use it to tell certain narratives about women. So I ended up going on a long scripted tangent about that, and as I filmed the video, as I was filming it, I realised that, well, it was after I'd filmed it, I realised that actually it was two videos, as you can probably tell from the length of this one, and that they were two separate topics. One of them was a review of a movie, and the other one was a social and cultural and whatever else discussion about women and gender, I suppose, and sexuality. But I say that just to say, because this video will start a little abruptly. In this section of the video you're about to see as well, I went off on an unscripted tangent about female sexuality, actually, and other topics that I think are actually quite important. So, they're two separate videos. If you would like to watch my Hunger Games review, you can. It might give a tiny bit of context to this, but I mean a tiny bit, like the odd sentence I say will make more sense, but really they're two separate videos, even though this was intended as a part 2. But I'm just saying that in case you're wondering why at certain points in this video I'm referencing the Hunger Games, or I'm talking as if you already all know what I'm on about. The other thing is, this video was filmed a long time ago, as you will be able to tell by the Christmas tree behind me. Due to various reasons, there's some personal reasons and other reasons, and also because of how long this has been to edit, because it wasn't an intended thing, so kind of cobbling it together and adding in bits has been a lengthy process. It's very late. So I apologise about that. It's also, just for the first bit, for the first 15 minutes or so, maybe a bit longer, my camera is a little bit out of focus. But after then, don't worry, it then goes back into focus. So if you're someone who that really annoys you, it does come back into focus at some point. So this is a video, a discussion about women's fiction, about women's romances, about what's popular in women's fiction and women's romances, and what, if anything, that says about women. And the reason I'm talking about this is because this is a pretty common problem in YA fiction, and I want to veer off slightly from the Hunger Games for a while and just talk in general about this, how this genre constantly romanticizes obsessive and toxic behavior to like 12-year-old girls, selling the idea that he's just misunderstood, and how gross, exploitative, and honestly borderline predatory I think it is for adults to do that as a way to make money off of minors. I still remember Jace Wayland borderline sexually assaulting who he thought at the time was his younger sister, and Cassandra Clare tried to sell 13-year-old girls that scene like it was romantic and not absolutely disgusting. I haven't forgotten that. Cassandra Clare defenders, just think about that. If Clare was an adult man writing scenes like that involving pseudo-incestual sibling abuse and trying to sell it to teenagers like it was hot and romantic, we would think he was a freak, projecting bizarre predatory fantasies onto underage children. Hands down, Everyone would be saying that. Middle-aged women writing mediocre romances for underage girls get away with way too much. It's because they smile and have nice hair and look like Christian YouTubers. Sarah J Maas, I'm looking at you. The fact that this woman actually wrote a romantic hero who broke the female protagonist's arm on purpose, tortured her, drugged her, assaulted her, and didn't he end up making her basically sign all her rights away to him? So I'm not saying that you can never have a morally grey love interest, or a love interest who is really bad but then redeems himself, or a love interest where there's a misunderstanding and he initially seems evil but it turns out he's not, which I believe was supposed to be the case for Sarah J Maas. However, let's use a little something called nuance in these scenarios. And look, I'm sorry, I think the way that book was written, it was obviously portrayed and supposed to be sexy how he was. Like, the abusive side and oh my god, later on, Gauthier, in the later books, you find out that it was a misunderstanding and he wasn't really bad, and the reason, he broke her arm, he did these things, and he did this and this and this, but it was only because, but the fact it was written like that in the first place, and it wasn't written as, like, this misunderstanding redemption thing. It was obviously supposed to be sexy. You will not convince me otherwise. That was supposed to be, like, kind of hot and, edgy, attractive, dangerous. And I know you will know this, because the only way Sarah J Maas could make this pairing of Feyre and the villain palatable was by making the initial love interest into an even more abusive guy. She had to character annihilate the current love interest to make the abusive arsehole who, again, tortured her seem like the better option. So don't even give me that. Which, I think, personally, for me, I don't know how you guys feel, but I think that's a really great message to send to teenagers, that the abusive guy who treats you terribly, doesn't respect your boundaries, assaults you, traumatizes you, is violent with you, treats you like crap, doesn't respect your autonomy, he's got deep side, he's probably misunderstood, he's probably, oh my god, he's got all these hidden depths, he really cares about me, he loves me, he does all, like, let's be clear, that's the underlying message here. And there's a difference, I think, between writing this kind of content for, like, adults, and then specifically your genre is children and teens. People who read kind of Cassandra Clare, those kind of books, 9 years old to probably 17 is the main age group. That's weird. That is weird. I don't know. I think it's, and they know this. They see that, they know who their fans are. They see their fans. They go to meetups, meet and greets, book signings. They know. There's lots of young, like, it's not all, like, 16-year-old girls, which even, they're still weird, but it's not. There's, like, young kids reading this. I just find it really bizarre. No, Gata, you're wrong. No, Sarah J Maas, she writes new adult fiction, not young adult fiction. It's not for kids. Again, please, stop. That is bollocks. Sure, they say that, but her books look like this. They're marketed like this. These books with these covers, this is not marketed at adults. They can say what they want and lie, in my opinion, allegedly, and say what they want about who the target audience is. This does not look like a cover you would design to appeal to adults. They look like teen books. It is my opinion, though, that publishers do this intentionally to make money off the very lucrative teen market, because you make so much money from teens, by selling what is effectively pornography disguised as fantasy to hormonal teenagers. They market it like this in such a way that parents who don't know better aren't going to think twice about letting their 13-year-old pick up a book like this. It looks like it's for that age range. But then the publishers and Sarah J Maas have a get out of jail free card and can claim, oh no, but we say that it's only for 18 plus. This is never intended for children. Why would you think that? Why would you so dumb? Why would you think that? I think it's scummy. Also, by the way, because I wrote that because I think I've heard that they before that they've said they're only for 18 plus, but I actually googled that and I actually can't find them outright saying that it is only for 18 plus, so I don't even know if they even pretend anymore. Or if they ever did, because I looked and I tried to find it if they say that it's intended for young women, as an actual women, 18 to 25 or whatever. But I couldn't, because I remember that as being a thing, but then I couldn't find that. So apparently I was right. I've done some more research into this, and there's interviews and quotes from Sarah J Maas saying that her publishers approached her and wanted her to publish A Court of Thorns and Roses and that series as young adult fiction. And Sarah J Maas agreed under the conditions that her editor wouldn't censor any of the sexual content. So they all know exactly what they're doing. They exactly decided to market it to teenagers, even though they knew that it was inappropriate. Sarah J Maas knew it was inappropriate, and she said, okay, fine, just as long as I can keep it as explicit as it is. It's like actually disgusting. Sorry, but this is where I'm confused, because am I crazy for thinking it's weird to have adults writing porn and marketing it at teens and putting it in the teen section? Is like, am I crazy for like thinking that's a weird thing to do? You know, and of course, all it takes is a quick Google. So look at this Guardian article. So given the it's about a teen superfan interviews Sarah J Maas. Given the content of her books, why are teenage fans interviewing Sarah? Sarah, looking like so wholesome Sarah. Okay, so it's even worse than I thought. So here we have this article about the Guardian article I said. A teen mega fan interviews Leigh Bardugo and Sarah J Maas, or like, you know, whatever. Okay, so there's that. But, so there's look, going back through the years, I mean, this is just The Guardian, but this is the point I'm making. Look, so reviews of Sarah J Maas books that are under children's books. Here, look at children's books. When these books, I don't know if you know the content of what's in these. And, like, this is my point. This is the problem. There shouldn't be confusion about this. There shouldn't be confusion, that this ends up being, like, so either it's intentional, which is what I do believe, or it's a complete accident. But how is it that so it's children's books? Why is this again and again that teen fans children's books? Oh, here we go, children's books, all Sarah J Maas books. And so to be fair, I looked at the Waterstones website. I had to put in the search Sarah J Maas. She doesn't seem to come up, at least from my quick glance, in the children's and young adult section on the Waterstones website, so that's good. But W.H. Smith, this is teen and young adult, first page, right here, Court of Frost and Starlight. So we've got, and again, if you know, like, the content of these, like, an appropriate, so the Hunger Games, that's all fine. There's, like, I would say, like, Maggie Stiefvater's book, so there's, like, the Raven Cycle. Books like that, they're, like, teen books, a bit angsty with romances that I think are totally fun and appropriate for teens and kids to be reading. But Sarah J Maas books, I don't think that's, my opinion is I don't think it's appropriate for teenagers to be reading. But if, like, at the very least, their parents should probably know. Like, and then, you know, whether they're allowed to read it or not, that's different. But, like, this is, like, look, teen and young adult, and would you have a problem with a teenager reading this? The cover's completely innocuous. It's like, oh, that's fine. First page, teen and young adult. This is my problem. Do you, like, either it's intentionally confusing, this should not be here, or it's on, and the amount of times I see her books in the teen section in bookshops, or the kids section even. But, like, they shouldn't have ended up there. Can you imagine if, like, 50 Shades of Grey ended up in the teen section or the kids section of a bookshop? And, yeah, her books, they're not as explicit as that. They're not as bad as that. But it's still, like, it should still be like, oh, this shouldn't be here. It's still inappropriate, I think, to be in that section. This is my problem with it. Like, I'm not trying to be the moral police and say that adults aren't allowed to read whatever they want to. Fine, but I think this is a problem. I'm sorry. I think this is weird and I think it's an issue. Can I also make the point, I mean, I'm not stupidly naive. I know that teenagers are going to be drawn to sexual content. Obviously, that's kind of the point I'm making. You're capitalising on that. It's not just that it's sexual content, it's that it's really toxic, damaging, abusive sexual content. That's my issue. There's also a conversation to be had here, though this is kind of a separate issue in and of itself, about book talk and TikTok and social media. And, well, first of all, the impact that's having on the publishing industry, and a lot of people have argued the declining quality of what's getting published. That's a whole topic for another time about that. But also the availability of that, and then children. So I came across a video the other day, a short, I'm not really on TikTok, but I came across a short the other day on YouTube of, again, a girl, she looked about 11 years old, and she's making this video with a Sarah J Maas book about, like, I don't know, it's just like meant to be like a fun little social media video, just one where she's holding up, like, a book you can't live without or something like that, with, like, the stupid music soundtracks that everyone does. I'm sorry, I hate those videos. But, you know, and she's holding up the Sarah J Maas book.
and she looked about 11. I'm thinking, no. But this is not rare. That's the problem. This is not like an anomaly of one kid who's picked up a book that's inappropriate for her. Everything is designed to market towards children. Not just teenagers, by the way, but children. She was a child. She wasn't a teenager. She was a child. But these books, I believe, are, like, everything about them, whether intentionally or not, you know what I think about that, but is intentionally designed to appeal to teenagers and children. And, you know, sometimes lovers of Sarah J Maas sometimes will get annoyed at that, because if you're an adult and you enjoy Sarah J Maas, you think, well, I'm not a child, it's not. That's fine if you're not a child and you love her stuff. But I kind of don't think in a way, it's not... I think it's kind of undeniable that a lot of the factors of it do really appeal to teenagers and children, and even down to how it's written, how it just reads, it reads like a really badly written YA book. There are not many, or at least that I've come across, books for adults written in that kind of style. And the other thing is, and this is then a whole conversation about another author who is like, so Colleen Hoover, who writes absolute, first of all, the most offensive thing about Colleen Hoover is the standard of her writing. It's absolute swill. She can't write. Sorry, she's untalented and terrible. Before you even get to the fact that pretty much every single male love interest in her books is abusive and creepy and pushes, like, yeah, it's just the worst. Like, one of her books is about a student-teacher relationship, trying to romanticize it and excuse it. Terrible, terrible, terrible stuff. Which is one thing, and, you know, her books are marketed for adults, and a lot of adults do read her stuff. But again, we come to, there've been, like, for example, middle school teachers who'll be saying, like, I cannot believe how many of my students I see reading Colleen Hoover books, and I'm shocked and blown away thinking, the content in those books. Firstly, again, it's the cover problem, because her covers don't give away anything as to what the content of the books could be. There's a bigger problem, basically, is what I'm saying, in, like, the book world. With stuff like this that is clearly not, that's really, really just with terrible messaging, and, you know, which for adults is one thing. I think in the same way that pornography, too much pornography viewed by young boys can, well, first of all, it's not great for them if they're exposed to it too young. Again, it's all about what you're exposed to at what age, can be kind of not great or traumatic even. But then also give them a totally warped view on reality and relationships and how things work in reality, because, you know, I think something similar could be said for this and young girls, and just romanticizing from a really young age, reading stories about men who are predators, or who are violent, or who sexually harass you, or who abuse their power in the sense of a student-teacher relationship, or all these things that are actually terrible, toxic behaviors. Oh my god, it's so romantic, is the best thing ever, and you're reading that as a kid, and like, this is not good. This is really, I don't think I'm overreacting, even though I kind of look crazy right now.
But, like, you know, Sarah J Maas, like, her fans are always young. They're always really young. Loads of 12-year-olds read her books, but as I say, it goes down to, like, as young as 9. And why would parents worry? You know, like, if you've got a smart 9-year-old reading above their level, you'd let them get a book from the teen section. Like, that would be fine. You'd think, oh, it won't be anything too outrageous. It's still for underage people. I mean, you know. Like, it won't have an abusive, violent predator romanticize just the love interest or anything. Because there's a difference between having a kid that's reading above their age level and who maybe is also got quite a good grasp on understanding kind of abstract concepts, and you think they're intelligent enough to read a book about some of the darker things in the world. There's a big difference. I'm not saying it's not about the content. There's a big difference between them maybe reading a book that has these themes in of, like, abuse and toxic, and, like, there's a big difference between that and them being able to cope with that if they're a smart kid. There's a difference between that and shown as, like, toxic and abusive, and as the same thing being shown as romantic and idolized, because even if they're a smart kid and can grasp things, and they could grasp it if it's, like, shown in a better way. I'm not saying we need to, like, coddle kids from the world. You know, some kids are able to deal with that kind of stuff. However, I feel uncomfortable with the fact that you're presenting it as romantic to kids that age, because guess what? They're still kids. And their brains are still smushy and growing. They're still smushy brains. They got smushy brains. You got to look after their smushy brains before they get into big brains. So they're only little smushy brains. They're easily influenced, even if they're clever. So for me, all this stuff, the Sarah J Maas stuff, it's the same vibe as when Pretty Little Liars, a teen show, had an underage girl groomed by her high school teacher, but rather than portraying it as bad, they showed their teenage audience and younger, because it was like middle schoolers that used to, like, I'm using American terminology, I'm sorry, but most of you American who watch me, you know what I mean, is mostly like middle school age, as well, because again, kids watch things that are just a little few years ahead of them. So many like kids that age were obsessed with Pretty Little Liars. So it was not just teenagers, it was younger. Again, rather than portraying it as bad, they showed their teenage audience that this was actually a forbidden love story, and everyone was so mean for trying to keep them apart, and in the end, the high school girl and the teacher who groomed her, they got married and love conquered all, and they proved everyone wrong. Good job! Gaslight the underage girls into thinking that if they are being abused or preyed on, it's actually just love. Yeah, that's such a fantastic message in a teen show. I'm sure nothing bad or weird ever came out of that, and no teenage girls got the idea into their heads that maybe it would be really cool and romantic if they dated their teacher and fell in love, or if that they were being preyed on, didn't say anything, or thought maybe it's fine because it was in Pretty Little Liars. One of the most damning things about Pretty Little Liars, actually, was how much it was emphasised that it was Aria's responsibility. So she's the high school girl that was groomed by her teacher. How much it was emphasised that it was her responsibility to not get her high school teacher in trouble.
I would never want to do anything that would get you in trouble.
I don't want to get you in trouble. It would be my fault if you get in trouble. Like, I remember that. How worried. So again, what about that? What if that aspect? What if that gets into your mentality and you watch that show, and then what if it might not have happened, but I'm saying, like, you could easily influence a kid who maybe that's happening to them and they've seen that show and they're going, but I don't want to get him in trouble because that would be like my fault, and you know, like Arya and Ezra, it's not fair. It would be if I get him in trouble for grooming me. And I know people like to say things like, you know, yeah, but stories aren't reality. Just because I watch a film or a book with this in it doesn't mean I like it in real life. Just because I like extreme horror doesn't mean I want to go kill people. Firstly, I'm slightly torn on that argument. There's valid points on both sides. There are, and I'm not saying that, but the thing I think of is, like, there are so many, there are loads of, like, sadistic serial killers who'll be, like, love horror films and be obsessed with gore and stuff, and that's not to say at all that average person who might be really into horror, that everyone who's into horror or that kind of stuff is gonna go and kill people. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that at all. I'm not saying, like, if you play a video game, you're gonna kill. I'm not saying that. I promise. I'm not saying that. But I think there is some kind of correlation between, like, what you consume and there's something. Not with everyone, maybe, and not, like, but I think in terms of, like, showing people's interest or, like, influencing things, let's not pretend that culture doesn't have an influence on our perception. Let's not pretend that stories don't have an influence on how we perceive certain things. Like, I'm torn on that argument. I think there's valid points on both sides. I think there's, you know, 6 of one and half a dozen of the other. Like, it's not all one or the other. But I think I agree. There is also, of course it's true that for a lot of people, stories aren't reality. I can watch this content, doesn't mean I like this stuff in real life, doesn't mean that I'm going to go do this in real life. Of course, that can be true as well. But secondly, I do actually think it's different with teenagers and kids, because I think they're not as good at telling fantasy from reality. Well, we know that one of the main differences between children and adults is that children can't tell the difference between fantasy and reality. They don't know what's real and what's not. Teenagers are in that. Obviously, they're more like adults in that they've got a better grasp on it, but they're not fully there yet. And anyone who saw how delusional teenage girls got with thinking that a member of One Direction would actually fall in love with them at a concert as they spotted them in the crowd knows that. Teenagers live in Delulu land. They've got squishy brains. They're squishy brains. It's not as squishy as the children's brains. They're getting more... This is very scientific, guys. I'm sure all the teenagers watching me feel incredibly patronised right now. But look, as I say, it's not about the content. It's really not. And I agree that teenagers... I agree that teenagers are ready to know about darker topics and the reality of the world. And I don't agree they should be coddled. But it's about the way you portray the content. Because I also agree with things like when I hear Neil Gaiman talking about, he writes, like, you know, it's kind of going back to, like, the Harry Potter arguments where some people are like, oh, it's too dark for kids and too scary for kids. Or, like, Neil Gaiman will talk about, like, he wrote Coraline as kind of like a horror novel for children, was his, like, aim in it. And he thinks that his kind of argument is that it's like that old quote. I don't think it's his quote, but I think he quoted it talking about this, but it's the same kind of concept. Or did he expand on this old quote? But he said something along the lines of that fairy tales don't tell us that dragons exist. Children already know that dragons exist. Fairy tales tell us that dragons can be defeated. So here's Neil Gaiman's argument on that, is that it's okay for children to have a certain level be exposed to a certain level of like darkness and scariness in their stories, because children already know that there's scary things in the world, and actually what you're doing is positive because you're showing them that these things can be overcome. And I agree a lot with that argument. I'm not about like coddling children, don't let the children see that it's a bad thing. But there's a big difference, like that's a very different mentality from that, and the kind of thing that's going on in young adult stuff with romanticizing this kind of abusive stuff. So it's very different between, like, children already know there are evil things in the world, yes, and they're just, you understand what I'm saying? Like, that's a very different vibe of, it's okay to show them dark things, they're going to know that someday in the world, here's how you be brave, here's how this character overcame this. I loved reading that stuff as a kid. I quite liked some of the creepy stuff. I loved that. As I say, I think there's a big difference between teens being ready to read adult books and content with dark themes, versus them reading books which are specifically marketed to them that have dark themes, but in a sugar, candy-coated, romanticized way, in a way that the creators of these stories know will just hook into all the hormones in their developing brains. So, like, one of those things feels like teenagers growing up and being ready to consume content with more complex topics, and the other feels sleazy, and like you are intentionally targeting them to take advantage and make money and exploit them. Does that make sense? So I have touched on this before in some previous videos. Specifically, I remember one of the times I talked about it was like rebutting some of, like when I talked about some of like the RedPill, more that political idea of like, this is how women are. That video I did on Rolo, I think I talked a bit about bad boys and that. And okay, so I have touched on this before, but look, we've got to address it again if I'm talking about this, if I'm going to talk about this topic. Because of what I talk about on my channel, this whole topic has political undertones. Cultural undertones, or like RedPill versus the feminist undertones. So if I criticise the glorification of the bad boy aspect of YA fiction, I've also got to address this is evidence women love abusers, nice guys are always ignored, and women really just want to be dominated and controlled crowd. Hello, boys. You're always here. Some of you are always here. So, you're wrong. Or at least you're vastly oversimplifying and misunderstanding the appeal, or jumping to conclusions, in my humble opinion. So I feel like this should be obvious, but no, the romantic appeal of villains or bad boys is not, in my opinion, and this is all my opinion, everything I'm going to say, but I feel like it's a pretty good opinion. So let me know. But no, it's not because women just want to be abused. Jesus Christ, no. Okay, so with Coriolanus Snow specifically, that character, the appeal is because he's intelligent, good-looking, powerful, charismatic, and also I think the whole bad boy thing resonates with the rebellious aspect in teenagers, of just saying screw it and behaving how you like, and it kind of, as they're pushing boundaries and rebelling and figuring out who they are and becoming independent and breaking away from their parents and starting to form their own identity, it makes sense that they're going to find this character that's rebellious and bad in a lot of ways and goes against the status quo and goes against these kind of... It makes sense why that is gonna... The screw it, I'm still angry aspect, why that is gonna resonate with teenagers and why they're gonna find that appealing. And I think the same can be true for boys and men too. Like, cold-hearted femme fatales are a trope for a reason and have always been seen as highly desirable. Like, no one's going to tell me that there's not, that's not also an archetype, one archetype, there's different ones, but that's not an archetype of feminine sexuality that men haven't always found, like, really desirable. Not all men, not all, but, like, that's not a thing. The whole bad boy thing is not evidence that it's just specifically women that are drawn to, like, some darker aspects in a person, or that women will only date you if you're a psychopath, or that it's only women who can find cruelty or, like, that attractive. I think there can be something in people that can find that attractive. But I also think you're probably right. I think people are probably right when they say, women find that slightly more appealing, or it's more of a thing, the bad boy thing, for women. And I probably would agree. I also think, so part of the appeal... So there's the rebellious for teenage, I'm talking teenage girls specifically. I'm probably like, for some adult women as well. But yeah, for teenage specifically, I think that rebellious thing, that's an aspect that's appealing about why villains or bad boys are romantically appealing. Again, I'm kind of bring up to go into why it's not just women want to be abused and dominated, and they hate nice people. They don't like nice boys. If you're a nice boy, women will throw a drink in your face and tell you you're a loser. And that's not true. Okay.
A big thing I realised I didn't touch on in this video, and that's simply because I didn't have time and I was more focusing on the domination, obedience aspect of this. But what I didn't go into is one of the points that could be raised is that women like bad boys or aggressive or violent men because they seem competent and capable, and so women like bad guys. And I'd refer here actually to, I've heard Jordan Peterson talk about this, and again, I don't have time to fully go into this, but what I would say is what women generally are attracted to is competence, is if you are capable, right? And the thing, and again, Jordan Peterson and I've had, and other like psychologists have talked about this, that what men with psychopathic traits are really good at doing is mimicking those behaviors. So if you have psychopathic traits, you're quite likely to be confident and sound like you know what you're talking about. Now, my argument would be it's not the psychopathic traits and arseholeness that women are attracted to. What women are attracted to is confidence and capability, and it just so happens that psychopaths are good at seeming like they are competent and capable. Those are not the same thing. Those are not the same thing at all, and I fully believe that it's the confidence and capability that women are attracted to, and thus the translation is women like arseholes. No, it's just because sometimes arseholes have the confidence to seem like they know what they're doing. It's not that's not the thing that women are attracted to. But again, that's a whole topic for another time. Haven't had time to go into this, but yes, just to say that.
So I'm saying, I'm further explaining why it's oversimplified to just say that. So I also think the appeal of romanticizing like villains or bad boys, I think there's an ego tripping aspect to it of, you know, like, oh my god, he hates everyone and is mean and cruel to literally everyone except me. He's actually really sensitive once you get to know him, but only I know that because he only shows that to me. He only shows that to me because I'm special. I'm so special. Such a special, precious little snowflake that this horrible person becomes kind to me and loves me, even though he's so terrible and he murders puppies. Oh my god, that must mean I'm cuter than a puppy. I'm so bloody fabulous. So there is something validating and appealing about that. I think there's an ego trip to it. And then also, as well, because this character is outwardly dangerous and merciless, but good to you, that probably also makes them seem like a protector figure. And like you would be safe with them. Because they're highly capable of hurting people, which, for vulnerable teenagers, and I think particularly teen girls, when the world suddenly gets very scary and different all of a sudden, and you can feel like prey in a lot of ways, it makes sense, I think, specifically for teen girls, why they'd be drawn to that. And I think it's more about that, if we're being sensible, than it is, you know, about the women want to be abused, that's what Andrew Tate says, and just look at what they find attractive in fiction. They love abusers. Which, firstly, that's only one of many tropes. But secondly, you don't actually understand what women want, and you are jumping to wild and simplistic conclusions that affirm your own worldview and opinion that women are either naturally inferior or naturally inclined to submit to the dominance of men, as I hear a lot from some of you in my comments. Which, you know, I appreciate. Galatea, you'd be happy if you just found a good man to submit to. Why do you have to say it like that? Why do you have to put it so weirdly? I hate that word now. I fucking hate the word submit now. Like, it makes me cringe. I was never a huge fan of the word before, but RedPillers have extra ruined that word for me. I think I have like, I get flashbacks when I hear that word, like all the awful things I've said. I actually want to do a video on it and what it actually means, because some of you like to pretend that submit doesn't really mean what it actually does mean and what we all know it means. You're not going to gaslight me into thinking that trust and respect is all that submission means, and that I would submit to a man if I really trusted and respected him. Trust is good, and I agree, trust is necessary, but submission is not the same thing. And if trust was all you meant, then you would use the word trust. But you don't. You say submit, because that's what you actually mean, and you know that those are different things. I'm not the one being pedantic with language by refusing to accept the wrong definition of a word. I will not be gaslit into believing that submission is a necessary requirement for a woman to be happy, or that or that it is inherently natural for a woman to do, which is the main argument, really, that women are naturally submit. Like, I agree. Like, there's some parts of the red pill that are, like, accurate in what they... And people get mad at me when I overgeneralise, but I'm sorry, I can't go into the specifics of not everyone, not all... Obviously, yes, take that assumed. But I hear a lot of this stuff a lot from, like, more mainstream or more inflammatory people, and they're right on some things. Like, I agree with... I've said this before. Yes, I agree. I think if a woman doesn't trust you and respect your capabilities, that's really bad. I think it's bad for both people if they don't trust and respect the other person's capabilities, but I probably agree. I probably think the red pill are right when they say that it's more important for a woman to feel that way. I think I agree with them. But it's not the same. That's not the same as submission. That's why there are different words. That's why we have a rich language with lots of different words that we can use when we mean different things. That's a topic for another time. Trust versus submission. And I kind of want to I've talked about that a bit in the past, but I kind of want to do a full video on that because I think that's interesting to dive into, the difference between trust and submission, because they're different things. There's overlap, which is why people get confused, and they pretend that they're only asking for trust when they say, submit to me, it just means you trust me. No, it doesn't. Stop it. Stop lying. Stop lying. Stop lying. Stop lying. You little liars. You know you're lying. But moving on.
Can I just be clear? I want to say this because I know there will be the inevitable comments of people saying, oh, but the people you're talking about aren't real red pill. These are just, like, crazy people online, or these are the inflammatory people, or you need to listen to real red pill, or I've never heard red pill guys saying that. That's not what the red pill teaches. I'll just quickly say this. I think the red pill ideology, or what's become colloquially known as the red pill, has been completely poisoned in the same way that feminism has. As in, you have a branding issue. You have a mainstream branding issue. And, you know, for the sake of brevity and without having to make 100 disclaimers every time, it's easier to say red pill. Everyone knows what I'm talking about. I'm sorry, you can say that's not the real red pill, but there are people claiming to be red pill who are saying all this stuff, just in the same way that you'll paint all feminists with the same brush for, you know, the loudest voices. So that's the situation we're at. And just like there are many, many different streams of feminism and so many different types and so many different representations of it, yes, it's probably the same with the red pill, but a lot of you aren't willing to give the same grace to feminists. So, you know, I mean, and I agree that it's not everyone, it's not the whole movement. Maybe it's not the quote-unquote real red pill, but that's just where we are. In mainstream, you might not like this, but this is just the truth, that your mainstream image has just been so completely decimated and poisoned. That's just what it's become known as. So yeah, I agree, not everyone, but I'm using that for the sake of brevity, and that just happens to be where we are. And the people spouting a lot of these ideas are claiming to be red pill.
So I've said this in the past, but I'm going to say it again here. All the men saying this about women loving bad boy characters, and why they love bad boy characters, and it's because women love to be controlled and abused, and women are naturally submissive, and all the men saying that, they have not actually read those books. If they did, then they would understand that the main part of the story is almost always the female protagonist managing to break down the walls of some outwardly appearing tough guy and see that he's just a damaged bird on the inside that they can nurse back to health and heal him from all his emotional hurts and his bad boy behaviour. There's only bad boy behaviour because he's just a hurt little birdie on the inside. It's funny that you think that those books are just like all about some cold brute being uber masculine and controlling and dominating women all the time while he never shows any weakness. None of you have a fucking clue what you're talking about. You just saw that clip of Jordan Peterson talk about how the most highly read romance fiction among women is about pirates and vampires, and you didn't stop to look beyond a surface level of what that could mean. If you want to analyse the psychology behind it, and I'm not claiming I'm an expert on this, but I at least have a working brain and some common sense and the ability to assess that there could be different options to why, not just jump to oversimplified conclusions. But if you want to analyse it properly, it's not actually enough to take at face value what you think the book is about. Read it. You actually have to analyse it and read it. Oh, girls like serial killers and they want to be told what to do and abused all the time. That's what this tells us. Stupid surface level analysis. You'd get an F in your English exam. And I personally am not a fan of the bad boy trope. Okay, I don't like it. I've never dated a bad boy and it's just not that appealing to me. They just seem sulky and immature. Like, grow up, Justin. You know, that is what a bad boy is like in real life, like Justin Wattpad Waller. please get away from me. However, so I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of the trope. However, I understand it and why it exists and why women find it appealing. I really do. And I've done enough videos in the past on YA fiction, plus Colleen Hoover, to know that it's deeper than that, than just abuse me. I get why it's appealing, and it's not because women really just want to be controlled or hurt by something dangerous. It's always, or almost always, the main point of the story, the plot of the story, is about changing him. He's never bad by the end. It's not a story about being dominated by some brute and losing your autonomy. To be honest, I kind of inclined to flip that narrative and say that the whole story is a power fantasy about your own desirability and power to the point where you've completely changed him. Of having made someone devoted to you to the extent that his power has now kind of become your power and can be used in your favour rather than against you. Does that make sense? Like, as a woman, I'm speaking from that perspective of that's what those stories kind of are. These stories are not just, oh, I'll submit now, and that's the whole book. It's the story of a power struggle between him and her, and yes, they involve some powerful man exercising power over her, but she's challenging his power, and guess what? She always wins, or they come to some kind of, balance, but, that's the plot of 50 Shades of Grey. That's the biggest example people use to say that women actually just want to give up all their power to a man. You do realise that the whole point of that is that she wins over him to the extent that she completely changes him, his life, and can exercise huge influence over him, his emotions, and his actions. That's partly why these books are so toxic, by the way, because they're just about obsession. It gets to the point where pretty much every single action he takes is motivated by her. He now completely revolves around her. But this proves that women just want to be subservient and have no power. You need to check again, maybe. Maybe read it. You don't know what you're talking about because you've literally taken the opposite message of what the story is actually about, in my opinion. You've seen the strong man in the story, or on the cover, and assumed that he must have all the power in that dynamic. You can read it as women naturally submit to you if you're authoritarian enough. If you want to, that's the message you can take from, I suppose, the prevalence of that kind of fiction, if you want to. But my advice would be, that would be stupid, because then you're probably quite easy to manipulate. Just because you don't notice she's using a different type of power to you doesn't mean she isn't powerful. The whole point of these stories is that the power dynamic has completely shifted by the end, from him to her. I'm sorry, but that's such a male point of view. No offense, that's not a bad thing it's a male point of view, but it is just such a male point of view that sometimes it seems like if strength isn't really obvious and in your face, then it doesn't exist for some of you. That's not how women work. The whole point is that it's subtle. Women don't need to be physically strong to be powerful, and if you really thought about it, you would know that. And look, and I won't get into this completely because I don't have time in this video, but the physical strength argument that it actually annoys me so much, because there are certain red pillars, not all of them again, probably them more stupid ones, yeah, fine, but there are certain of them who unironically use that playground logic to argue that strength makes men superior beings, and they also believe they also believe not only that physical strength makes men more superior beings, but they also believe that the fact that women are attracted in general to men who are physically stronger than them means women just want to be controlled and are happiest being controlled or dominated in every way. And honestly, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard, because we are not just physical beings, we're also mental and emotional beings, and spiritual, for those of you who count that one. And if you think that in those books that you haven't actually read but are still using as evidence that women just want to be submissive and controlled in every way, if you think that most of those books don't end with her having just as much, or frankly, more emotional power over him as he has physical power over her, you're an idiot. Read Twilight. It's shit, but actually read it. With awareness of what is going on and not the surface level of girl falls in love with a vampire who's better than her in every way, and therefore the female fantasy is to be inferior and obedient. How does the series end? With Bella having emotional power over not just Edward, but pretty much everyone. One of the biggest criticisms of the story is that literally everything always revolves around her and everyone is obsessed with her, and the influence that gives her is huge. It's the female equivalent of a ridiculous male power fantasy of being able to beat up like 100 men and explosions and cars or whatever the hell else you guys think about. Guns, I don't know. Like, they're both power fantasies is the point. They're both power fantasies about status and influencing the world around you. They just take different routes to get there. And most women's power fantasies probably aren't going to involve physical strength, for obvious reasons. They're more about emotional or social power, which is more hidden and subtler by its nature, but shouldn't be sniffed at because it can be really powerful and either immensely positive or insanely destructive. But it's undoubtedly powerful. So, all that to say, I don't think these books are a fantasy of being powerless. It's the opposite. I think, again, even the analysis I'm giving it, whatever, but it's like this is a surface level oversimplification probably, because you could probably take different routes and take different things out of it. But I don't think it's a fantasy of being powerless. I think it's the opposite. You're just not seeing it because that type of power is just not obvious to you, so it becomes invisible. And you also probably quite like the idea that women's deepest desire is secretly just to obey you in everything, even if we say otherwise. It's easy to believe something you wish was true. So I think sometimes the fact that there is a power struggle going on, there is a different power dynamic, I think it can sometimes be invisible to blokes, that kind of thing. But women see it. It's not invisible to us because we see other women using that type of power all the time. Like, physical strength is not the be-all and end-all of power, and it's like arguing with children who can only think literally. Okay, mini rant over. After all I've said about the power fantasy thing, and like me giving that hypothesis as one of the reasons why I think those books are so, I'm giving that as an argument against why those kind of things mean that women just don't want to have autonomy or just want to be hurt and controlled. I feel like people are going to remember here what I said about Sarah J Maas and say, but women are reading about abusers. You said he broke her arm. Okay, no, you don't get it. Yes, that actually happened. He did break her arm and drug her. And it was gross. But again, you would actually have to read it to understand the appeal is not actually about being hurt. At least I fucking hope not, but everyone has their thing. Go wild, Sarah. The point of the story is that she fixes him. Yeah, the guy who broke her arm sexually harassed her and kidnapped her was just a big sweetheart all along. He was damaged and vulnerable, really. He just desired her so much that he had to do those things to her. And it was all a big misunderstanding. And he just needed to be loved. Everything I said in my point still stands. It's still a power fantasy about being able to take someone really dangerous and basically disarm them into adoring you so much that you have complete power over them. Which, seriously, that's how the story ends. Which, by the way, makes fucking sense as a female instinct to deal with a physical threat, because you're probably not going to be able to conquer it physically because of the limitations of biology. And in a lot of cases, trying to do so is probably a stupid idea that might get you killed, especially if the threat is a man significantly stronger than you. So it makes sense female power fantasies are going to differ from men's power fantasies of being able to beat people up. The idea that you could turn something dangerous into something that won't hurt you, but will instead protect you, of course, that's going to be appealing and reassuring to women and unconsciously come out in stories. Most hero stories reassure us of unconscious fears and threats that we don't even know we have. And these are no different, I don't think. In a way, you could kind of see a lot of these stories as less love stories and more as soothing the primal fear of men who want to kill you stories. Unconsciously signaling to you, if you're a woman, if there was a threat like this, you could neutralize it. It would be okay, you could make it so he doesn't murder you. I think you could make a strong argument for that. That could also explain the redeemed sexual assaulter love interests. There's been a few of those. And again, please note that he's always redeemed to the point he's not going to do it again. Mostly, I think. But in other words, that threat is neutralized. That's not going to happen again. You're safe from that now. yeah, do you understand what, like, I don't know, this is just a hypothesis. I'm just saying, like, this might not be right, but I think you can make this argument, quite a strong case for this, that it's about that, because, again, some people will take that, and there's so many different, like, kinds of tropes and stories and love interests, but there are some, the redeemed sexual assaulter, that, like, I've come across a few of those, especially in YA fiction, which is fucked up. But I don't think the point of that is that women want to be R-worded. I think it's, again, about if there was that threat, it can be made not a threat anymore. It's okay, you're safe. I think it's more about that. I think that's what it's about. Like, dark and fucking terrible storytelling. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it's a good thing. Like, I'm not trying to everything I've just said, by the way, I'm not trying to justify or, like, I'm presenting that as why I think that's popular. So, like, dark and terrible storytelling, but maybe there's something in that. All these reasons, by the way, I'm bringing up as reasons for why I think these things exist. I actually don't like a lot of these things, especially in young adult fiction. I think that's probably not good. And I think that adult women, like Cassandra Clare, should know better and shouldn't be using every psychological trick in the book to make an abusive person seem romantic by appealing to all of these idealistic, ridiculous wish fulfillments. Either these writers are mentally and emotionally stunted and actually do think those behaviours are romantic, in which case I'm praying for you, or it's more cynical than that and they know exactly what they're doing in order to create a soup of angst that teenagers will eat up, and they will sell every copy of their book while not caring how stupid it is. And also, again, I think another aspect of it is the fact that so many of these love interests are toxic also creates loads of drama and angst between the couple, and teenagers thrive on angst, as we all know. It's their main food group. But that's obsession. That's what obsession is. It's not actually good in reality to have someone obsessed with you. Well, it can be dangerous. Or to be obsessed. But obsession is appealing for teenagers, especially teenagers who don't feel like they're getting enough love from people around them. If someone's obsessed with you, they'll never abandon you or leave you, and you're valid, you're the centre of their world. Like I said, I think that's why they're drawn to obsessive and controlling love interests like Edward Cullen, for example. Like, they're just leaving childhood and having to be on their own. Oh my god, and suddenly without the support of your family, I mean, you still have that when you're a teenager, but suddenly you feel very, like, you're quite vulnerable in a way, suddenly. I do think especially for teenage girls, you really feel that vulnerability suddenly, and it's really just, can be quite horrible and shocking. Like, you're prey a little bit, you can feel like that. Like, the world feels chaotic and scary, and if someone's controlling you and obsessed with you, it feels stable. In fiction, at least. I think that's why someone like Edward Cullen, who's just, like, obsessed with her and controls her every move, I think that's why that's appealing, especially to teenage girls. But in real life, obsession isn't good. And it's not care. I think why these characters, by the way, appeal to teenage girls more, someone like Edward Cullen, there is something fatherly about it. Hello, Freud! But what I'm saying about them leaving childhood and they're suddenly kind of on their own a little bit in the world without their parents there, they're not, like, being, you know what I mean? It's like suddenly you're kind of... Edward Cullen, like, how he is with her, how controlling he is, these are my rules. These are, like, he's very protective, but it's very much, like, something really paternal about it. Like, it's very fatherly in the sense of, don't go out, don't see that person, don't, not healthy, not good. But it's literally kind of quite, I think that's why, again, it appeals to teenage girls, because they're just kind of leaving that. They're just, and that kind of pseudo-parental figure, when they still, the illusion of being free from their parents, but still have a pseudo-parental figure, is probably going to be quite appealing.
Interestingly, if you want to continue that Twilight theory, then her little fling with Jacob in the middle of her Edward relationship is kind of like, he's like this rebellious bad boy with a motorbike that comes in for a little bit. I guess as a way of rebelling against this pseudo-father figure. Like, from what I remember, Edward's reaction to her interest in Jacob or friendship with him is weirdly paternal, like very, yes, jealous, but more also, I suppose, like maybe an unhealthy, overbearing fatherly reaction of like, he's dangerous, he's no good for you, stay away from him, like fear for her well-being and safety rather than like sexual jealousy, although there's a bit of that too. But there's I think you might be talking that. Who knows? But I think you could probably interpret Twilight in that way as well. So that's an interesting way to look at it.
Obsession is all about them, and it has nothing to do with actually giving a shit about you. But teens don't know that, and for them it's reassuring. Especially if you're insecure, an insecure teen, you don't know if people like you, if you're pretty, or if you're desirable, and then someone's like, but I'll kill myself or commit a genocide if you leave me. The kind of thing every girl wants to hear. Validating, I get it. I also just want to say, oh god, okay, I haven't scripted this. I disagree with the point of view that it's natural for women to want to be controlled. And I've been going a lot into kind of some of the RedPill stuff who will argue that and use things like 50 Shades of Grey and how popular it is as a reason for why that's true, and women do just want to be controlled and hurt in general, and that's like female nature. They talk about this a lot, female nature. Female nature is this and this. And for why women are happiest when they're submissive, and look, you can tell from all these things they read and blah blah, and women won't respect you unless you're kind of, I don't know, all these things, and unless you're toxic, and like that's where a lot of this male dating advice comes from in certain corners of the internet. Is basically like the Justin Waller kind of school of thought, some of it, but that they'll be giving some of this advice of, well, you have to be as a man, and Andrew Tate, he will say things like that as well, you have to be kind of violent and degrading to women in order to be attractive. You have to be toxic. You have to be like brutal. You have to tell them how it is and how it's going to be, because really women want to be controlled. They might not know they want to be controlled, but that's female nature, and it's biology and it's primal, and that's how you're really successful with women, is you have to become this kind of basically caveman, Viking type, like, because and I've really for a while, this is kind of going over the top, I've really for a while disliked that school of thought, obviously, but particularly there's a real, okay, how do I explain this? There's a real, in some of those circles, there's a real, like, and this is where me and the RedPill, like, part ways, okay? Because for a while, and I think this is why, because I've always talked in the past about, I think there's a huge value in femininity, and, like, I love women. I think women are great. Men are great too. I love men too. Masculinity is also great. But because I've talked in the past about, I think there's power in, like, femininity. And when I say this, by the way, I'm not saying that if you're a man who is naturally more feminine, that's a bad thing. That's totally fine. And I'm not saying that if you're a woman who's naturally more masculine, that that's a bad thing. That's totally fine. There's no problem with that. I'm not saying that this is the way women should be. I'm not saying that at all. But my position has always been, I think most women are more feminine than men in general. And it's fine that there's not always, but I think that's true. I think that's just true. I think you're a bit dishonest if you try and argue otherwise. Like, men and women are different, obviously. I think people all know that. And that doesn't mean if you're... But these are generalizations are so broad that you can't really categorize individual people based on them. And I'm not saying there's one way for men and women to be, okay? But my position has been that, and also that I think there is value in femininity, and in the past... And I've kind of spoken in the past about how I don't like when there's a trend of trying to make every female character, in order to make her like, oh, you know, that strong female character, strong independent woman... And all it is giving her, like, traditionally male characteristics or traditionally masculine characteristics. So it's like a female character can't be powerful in a way that would be... And I'm not saying you can't have those characters, because some women are, like, naturally stronger or are trained in fighting or whatever. That's completely fine. But I'm saying if that becomes, if you're doing that with all of them and that becomes a standard of power, and you're saying, well, and I think more men are more like that than more women are.
This is what I'm trying to say. If you set the standard of power and value as physical strength and fighting ability, then that is naturally going to lead to women being seen as less than. As a natural outcome of that. That is the only way that is going to end up. That is the only way that's going to go. Because however much people try to pretend otherwise, we all know there are significant strength differences between men and women to the advantage of men in general. Now, does that mean that if you're a woman and you are strong, that's a problem? No, of course it doesn't. Does that mean that if you're a woman and you're strong and you're good at fighting, that's a problem? No, of course it doesn't. But what it does mean is if we set the standard of physical strength and fighting ability as power, the only way to have power or to show your worth, it is going to be mostly women. I mean, a lot of people, but mostly women who are going to be disadvantaged by that. And mostly women who are going to feel lesser than and who are not going to be able to achieve that level. So for that reason, frankly, I'm getting quite tired of people accusing me of sexism when I say that it's inherently in favour of men
when you have all these characters and you have the epitome of a strong character is someone who can beat loads of people up and is really, really good at fighting. And then I get people going, you're so sexist for suggesting that women can't do that. Oh my God, you're so mean, you're so mean. I'm not mean, biology is mean. That's just the bloody reality. If you want to deny it, that's fine. Live on a planet imagination. But I'm not sexist for, and again, I'm not trying to box women and I get accused of that. No, I'm not. If you're really good at fighting and you're amazingly strong and that's fantastic, that's brilliant, that's amazing. Well done. But that doesn't mean that the fact doesn't still remain in general that there are strength differences between men and women. I think you're kind of actually mad if you, I don't know what to say to you if you deny that. And the same people denying that are also the same people going on about violence against women. And like, how do you think violence against women is so possible if like it wouldn't be such a big deal if we were physically as capable of defending ourselves? This is why it annoys me, because I think there are some things essential to, it's a lot of feminists or self-proclaimed feminists who a lot of the time accuse me of this. Recognizing the strength difference between men and women, I think, is pretty essential to feminism, and I think it kind of always has been. There are certain things you like it because it's such an essential part of the female experience. Again, that doesn't mean that if you're a woman and you're really strong and you're good at fighting, that's a problem. That doesn't mean I want to get rid of all the female characters who are really strong and good at fighting. That doesn't mean that at all. But I'm saying, if that becomes the standard of power, that we say this is how to be strong, this is what, then that is naturally going to come down against the favor of women, and going to make a lot of women feel less than, make a lot of women feel, kind of crappy about themselves. And I don't think it's sexist for me to say that there are strengths and value that women have in other things. I kind of see what you guys are doing if you're pushing physical strength as the ultimate level of power, because some people get annoyed at me because they're pushing physical strength and fighting as like the ultimate level of power and what it means to be powerful. They get annoyed at me when I come along and say, hang on, you do realise this is going to put women at a disadvantage. They then get annoyed at me for pointing out that obvious truth. It's like, actually, I think if we're going to accuse anyone of sexism, it's not me. Because that's fine if you want to hold physical strength as the ultimate of power, but it's inevitable that is just going to turn out that women are going to be seen as less powerful. I don't know why this is hard to work out. If you keep going down that path, physical strength is the ultimate level of power, but women are going to come out as lesser than. We're going to be seen as lesser than. And I think it's kind of ironic that I'm the one being accused of sexism for pointing that quite obvious fact out. And if you're going to say that, basically saying that if a woman's naturally feminine, then she can't be a strong character. So I've always spoken about that and gone, I think there's value in femininity. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't think there's anything wrong with women being feminine. I love femininity. I think it's great. But because I've said that, this is where me and the RedPill, because the RedPill will be kind of with me to a certain point. What I really dislike about certain pockets of the culture or the internet, and this Tate fits into this category, which is I've always kind of found him repulsive. There's a real disgust of femininity with some of these men who claim to want feminine women, and they do, but they also are like, they see femininity as like inherently degrading or disgusting or weak. That's what it is. Like they'll be like, yeah, women should be feminine and that's how women naturally are, and I like a feminine woman, but in their mind, which that's fine, I'm fine with that up to a point, but then in their mind they equate everything weak and bad with femininity. And they have a real, even though they're claiming to want that, and they are around, they want women to be feminine, and they want to be kind of controlling and more masculine, in their mind, even though they're like that, they actually on some level really hate femininity. They are disgusted by it, they think it's degrading, they think it's weak, they're kind of like, they don't see any strength in it. They see it as something to be conquered and dominated and controlled, and they don't like it. You're not going to. There's a lot of they do not like femininity. They'll claim they do, and they'll go on podcasts. But like Pearl is like a prime example of this. So she'll talk, and men will go on her podcast, and they'll talk about how it's important for women to be feminine. But do not tell me that there's not this undercurrent coming from her, but coming from where they just do not like femininity. They're like, women should be this way, but they also they dislike femininity. They dislike it. And they're disgusted by it, and they think there's weakness in women, and there's a really strong current of that, and they think femininity is like embarrassing. It's embarrassing and it's degrading. And if you are feminine, you should be feminine as a woman. If you're a woman, you should be feminine, and you should be. But also, what that means is that it's also degrading for you. You're inherently you're inherently low, and that's fine because you should be there. That's where you should be. You should be degraded, but just know that it's kind of disgusting what you are. But you should be that. I mean, so this is the problem, and I've been really like wrestling with that point of view for a while. I think in my own head, but also like in terms of like the things I'm arguing and like talking about, because I don't believe that. I don't think that this is what I just went and said everything about like the physical strength thing and why the argument really annoys me. That means women are inherently inferior, because I could just as easily pull the card and like, yeah, but you can't make a human being in your body. Like, there's different, like, okay, so then you're inherently inferior. Like, what we talking about, inferior, superior? Like, things are designed for their purpose. If you know, like, yeah, I'm inferior as a soldier because I'm just not very strong, but I'm superior as if to creating a person. But I'm not going to use that argument because that's stupid as well. And then also, that's not even getting into, I'm not saying that's all women are good for is making babies. I'm not saying that. Because, of course, then you've got how intelligent is someone? It's just silly to have these really simplistic ways of valuing human beings. I haven't scripted this, so I'm sorry if this is a bit all over the place. But actually, as it's come up, I think it fits, kind of important to mention. I guess it ties into the whole theme of my channel, or what I've been talking about for quite a while. It's interesting how things come full circle. I started off kind of criticising young adult literature and talking about, like, specifically the kind of terrible romances and like bad boy trope and criticising that, and I've kind of gone around like to culturally then criticising like the RedPill and like, yeah, now we're bringing them together again. I don't know, it seems my channel does have kind of a theme, but unintentionally I seem to be drawn to those things to talk about. But because sometimes people ask me why I've spent a lot of time criticising the certain aspects of the RedPill, or like idiots, I suppose, like Justin Waller or Rollo Tomasi or Andrew Tate. And some people are like, well, they're just idiots, it's low-hanging fruit, why are you making videos on them? I'm going to talk about this more on my Patreon, actually, because someone asked me that over there. But what I will say is, I mean, firstly, because they're silly, but because there's something... I feel compelled to challenge their narrative that, whether explicitly, some of them are explicit about it, or implicitly, that the nature of women is to be obedient, is to be degraded, is to be submissive, is inherently something kind of weak and detestable. That's the feeling I get from a lot of them. And what I dislike is, okay, and in terms of, and that's why I've been talking a lot, people go, why are you talking about this, like, men's, yeah, people will sometimes say that to me as well, but I also go, well, the RedPill's not for you, it's for men, why are you getting, it, of course, it impacts, I mean, it's about women, you can't, like, the whole point of a lot of it is about women, you can say it's just for men, sure, but it's about women, it's very obsessed with women, a lot of it, and concerned with women, so it's not like, I don't know, it's just man things. It's very, and if there's something that's going to be talking about, I suppose, oh god, I'm gonna sound like an SJW now, wokist. No, if there's something that's talking about like my identity, but literally like something that's, and well, because you're talking about women. And saying this is how women are, this is female nature, this is what makes a woman, this is how women, what women want, this is how women think, this is what women are, this is how women are, you're telling me a story about myself as well. Of course that's going to interest me, and I'm going to have things to say about that, whether I agree or disagree. Because you're telling me about myself, and often it's wrong. What I've been fascinated with for a while, not because of what they are in and of themselves, but because of what the impact they have on the culture and what people say about women, is things like 50 Shades of Grey, those kinds of stories, like 365 Days, like all of this, After even, Which, this is like an important or an interesting cultural thing to talk about. Well, I'm interested in it because what people take that and use that and to tell me about myself and what that means about me. That's why I'm interested in these things now, because of what people are telling me that it means about myself. But on several levels, on like a mental level of, I just disagree with a lot of these arguments they will make. I think they're wrong. So from like on a mental level, an intellectual level, I feel compelled to be like, okay, look, here are the flaws in your arguments for you saying that this means women are like this or this or this. I understand not everyone's saying that, and some people are talking more complex, but a lot of it is just women are naturally submissive. You hear that all the time. And a lot of them will use things like 50 Shades of Grey or 365 Days or even their own experiences to say that means women, even if they say they don't, want to be degraded, want to be hurt, want to be controlled, want to be told what to do. And that's the law of the jungle, that's the natural state of things. That's how things are. And any woman who says otherwise is just denying it. Of course, women like men like this. This is what, and that's kind of then a lot of the big part of the red pill, like the advice is men, you need to be like this. That's kind of Justin Waller's whole thing, is playing on that, and I just think they're wrong. I really think they're wrong. But it's not, the reason why I'm also drawn to talk about it is it's not just as simple as saying they're wrong, that's the end of it. Because I think it's more complicated than that. And on some of the things, they're right, or they appear to be right. And so just dismissing everything and ignoring it, as some people do if they disagree with that kind of thing, going, no, it's not. I think it's worth investigating, I think is what I'm trying to say. But I think they're drawing the wrong conclusions. So there's one thing I would like to say, is that, just to kind of explain why I'm going down this train of thought and why I'm talking about what I'm talking about. I'm not trying to demonize people or judge people or say you're evil or bad or something wrong with you. Let's say if people who want to be degraded or are into 50 Shades of Grey or whatever the hell, okay? I'm not making a personal statement about you as a person. It's not about you as an individual. Or if people go, why are you even talking about this? This isn't even a problem. Let people do whatever the hell they want. I agree, people can do whatever the hell they want. I'm not trying to make it a problem. The reason that I'm talking about this stuff is because, firstly, is because it's inherently like gendered. I don't think I'd talk about it at all actually if it wasn't so gendered. I think that's fairly obvious. I mean, maybe someone can give me a compelling argument as to why it's actually not gendered and that's not true, but from everything I've seen, I think it would have to be pretty compelling evidence to convince me that it's not mostly women who are drawn to that stuff, that it's not mostly women's fiction, and that the narrative isn't that it's women who want to be, I don't know, degraded, controlled, whatever the hell, pick your terminology. So because of that, this is not, I'm not trying to make a statement about people who say they're into that, whatever. I'm just saying that because it is so gendered, and it is, I think also people can't ignore that it's mostly, because this is sometimes a narrative I'll see. It's like, well, why the hell are you making, if I see people talking about this, it'll be, why the hell are you making a thing out of this? There's nothing wrong with this. Let people do whatever the hell they want. There's nothing, like, this is all totally fine. There's nothing wrong with this. It doesn't say anything about women. It just is, leave it be. I don't think that's a good explanation. I'm sorry. It's not satisfying for me. As an explanation, it doesn't answer a lot of the questions I have about why this is a thing that seems to be predominantly women. It's not satisfying. It's not a satisfying answer for me. I could pretend it was. But it's just not good enough to. It's not good enough for a lot of the questions I have in my head. And if it's not good enough for me, it's not good enough for a lot of people. And the problem is, people see what's true in the world. So people are coming along and seeing, okay, it's mostly women who are drawn to these things. Therefore, and then they draw conclusions because other people are ignoring it. So if you're someone who's and you're ignoring it and going, it doesn't say anything about women, you can say that if you want to, but it's not good enough to just ignore it and pretend that this isn't a thing. So if people are ignoring it and saying it's just everyone, this is not gendered, it kind of is. And if you're ignoring that and pretending that it's not all, but majority of women who are drawn to that, if you're ignoring this, then you're opening the door, and you're not giving another explanation. Then you are opening the door for other people who dislike women or see women as lesser than, or see femininity as actually is weak and degrading. You leave them the door wide open to come up with whatever story they want to tell about the fact that this thing exists. Because I think we can all see that this thing exists. And if you are not giving an explanation or a narrative for why you believe it exists, because you don't want to, because it's just whatever, we're going to ignore this. Or we're going to, say that it's like people who pretend that sexuality doesn't say anything about human psychology. That's kind of a bit, like, that's not a good enough answer for me, because I think it does. I think, of course, like, what else does it say about, like, yeah. So it's like, so you're not giving an answer, you're just saying it doesn't say anything. Oh, this doesn't say anything about female psychology. This says nothing about female psychology. It's just what people are into. It doesn't mean, it's totally fine, totally normal. It doesn't say anything about female psychology. Of course it says something about female psychology. Of course it does. Like, how can you say it doesn't? If it wasn't gendered, I'd agree with you, but it so clearly is. So because of that, then you're opening the door for these people who don't like women to come along and say, I'll tell you what it says about female psychology. I'll tell you what it says. It says this. It says that women are lesser than us because that they want to be degraded and they want to be low, and that this is a story we can put. This is a story it tells us about this. So this is why I'm talking about this. So the reason I'm talking about this is not to try, and I'm not making a comment on the morality. I'm not trying to be the moral police. I'm not making a comment on the morality or the decency of people who engage in that, okay? I just want to say that up front. Please understand that. I'm not making a judgment on you. But what I am trying to do by this, because it's important for me, because I want to understand why as well, I just feel compelled to. And because people are telling me that it means certain things about me, about women, about, so I want to, so this is why I want to talk about this. It's again, put that aside. It's not about you as a person. It's not about making any moral judgments on you. It's not about even saying whether you should or shouldn't be into this. I'm not making that call. But what I am saying, what I am trying to do with this is find an answer to why this thing exists that goes deeper than and is more than what some people say, that because women are weak and degrading and lesser than us, than men. I want to find an answer alternative to that also isn't just, this doesn't say anything about female psychology, it's just people having sex. It's like, okay, it does say something. Like, because, come on. So neither of those are good enough answers for me. And also because I think I do have answers to this. And I think it's interesting to talk about. I think it's important to talk about. And I have alternative answers that aren't just women want to be degraded and hurt, that I'm going over in this video. So this is why. And also because because I think there are loads of women who, because they've been told this narrative about this, or this is prevalent in the culture, therefore it says this about women. There are loads of women who end up believing these things about themselves. Maybe this does mean I'm weak and degraded and all of these things. And so it's to them I'm speaking to. So if you're into all this stuff and you don't feel like it says anything about you as a person, you don't feel degraded, you don't feel like it, that's fine, then it's not for you. But for those people who are being told that, well, the majority of women are into this, therefore this says this about female psychology, therefore you are a low creature and you're embarrassing and despicable. And there are a lot of women, I think, who feel that way because they've been told that, because there's not an alternative narrative. So this is for them as to other answers, I don't know, potential answers for female psychology for women who do feel lesser than because of this stuff. I just know it to be true that it is not natural for me to be obedient, and I don't think that's a cultural conditioning. I don't think, part of the reason I know this is because I have parents and they've told me what I was like as a toddler and a baby, and supposedly there's aspects of my character that have always been there since before I could talk. So, maybe they're culturally imposed, but I don't think it's feminism brainwashing me into thinking that I'm like this. And actually, I'm just really docile and submissive and obedient, really, on the inside. It's just feminism that brainwashed me. I don't think that's true, because I feel like I know my inherent nature better than that. And also, again, as I say, apparently, if I take my elders at their word, I have always been like this, but lots of women are too, and it's not just that I'm an outlier either. I don't think in terms of women. I don't think I am. I think in a lot of ways. I think really my character and how I am in a lot of ways aligns quite strongly with generalizations about women, and like, maybe not the negative ones, it's the nice ones. But I think my personality type and how I am, I'm just guessing this, but I feel like if you were going to generalize, like get kind of, what's the general like kind of psychological analysis of like a woman, how's her personality type, how like, I feel like I fit into probably a lot of that. I don't think I'm an outlier in that sense, but I don't know. But so I don't think it's just telling me something about me and that I'm an exception to the rule. And by the way, I'm highly agreeable. People don't think that. This is the funny thing, because I think people interpret sometimes my YouTube persona as how I am, like the pseudo-psychologist character. And I can be like that sometimes, don't get me wrong. Actually, if I'm pushed too hard, then I can be really quite stubborn, and there's an aspect to my personality that is like that. It's not completely a fabrication. I'm like, people think I'm like, it's funny because people say like, oh, you must be really like aggressive, and like, yeah, and I'm not really. I'm really quite agreeable in a lot of ways. I think people sometimes taking sometimes the YouTube presentation as personality analysis, and it's not that accurate. So I think I fit in a lot of ways into the more like agreeable, if you're feminine like personality types. And I still know that doesn't mean that's different from like naturally obedient or submissive. It's basically, in essence, it boils down to women are inherently inferior and weak. And like, I don't just mean weak in terms of physical, I mean like as beings, or, you know, in every way, like inherently weak, controllable, obedient, submissive. They just want to be told what to do by a strong man. And if you are authoritarian enough and brutal enough, women actually really want that. They say they don't, but they really do. It's like in some, and I've spoken about this, it's what annoys me, like in some ways I see like a dislike, and I think, I'm not saying that there's not a dislike and hatred of men in a lot of areas of the internet and stuff, because I think that there's that too, but what frustrates me is like, I feel like a dislike or a disgust or like disregard from both the left and the right to women. I think there is a dislike of women from some people on both sides, on either side of the extreme. Like a real nasty, well, literally my video on Vorsh, you know, I feel like his whole, just femininity, I think he hates it. He thinks it's really something to be sneered at, like something embarrassing, something pathetic, something weak. Very much how he is, in my opinion. He's an extreme leftist. And then you get it on certain aspects of the right, or where they also think femininity is kind of weaker and silly and frivolous and embarrassing. But the only difference is they kind of agree on that, but the only difference between them is that the left thinks that women shouldn't be like that because that's embarrassing and disgusting and degrading, and the right thinks that women should be like that because that's how women are, and they're just a little bit lower, and they should, you know. So I'll tell you where a lot of this ends up. So some of the like darker sides of the, I don't know if manosphere is a really broad term, and I've said it before and I say it again. There are a lot of aspects of the manosphere or the red pill that are positive and giving genuinely positive advice for men that are fine, that are perfectly above board, whatever, fine. There's darker sides to it. So like some examples that I come across that me and my friend were talking about is some men, they and it's this is what I mean, this idea of femininity is inherently weak. So they'll say, well, a woman, and I don't think these are huge influencers, but the fact that this is a mentality at all and they're preaching this is a bit disturbing. So they'll say, well, boundaries are inherently masculine. So if women should be feminine. They should be feminine, and that means soft, and that means more agreeable and more compliant and more cooperative. I agree on some level. I agree with the more cooperative thing. I think that's probably more like inherently more feminine trait. That doesn't mean that only women have that, or again, I think it's good for everyone to have a more balance of masculine and feminine, everyone. But I would describe that, yes, as a more feminine trait, is kind of cooperation or whatever, which is different to compliance. And I was talking to my friend about this because she's very not very into this stuff, but she's like very concerned about this stuff because she's more traditionally feminine. She kind of wants to be, as much as is possible, she would want to be a stay-at-home mother and like all that kind of thing. So she's, and a lot of the men she comes across who are pretending to kind of be more traditional men, or who would they use the facade of traditionalism to actually, they're just kind of abusive. So they just want a doormat. They think when they're talking to a woman and she says, I'm traditional, their eyes like kind of light up and they think that means, oh, I can do what I want, yeah? You have to do whatever I say. That's what they think it means. She's like, no. So there's certain corners of the internet where, and this is really concerning her, where there's some people who will preach that that having boundaries is inherently a masculine trait. And if your woman, because this is talking to men, so your woman she shouldn't have boundaries, men. Because if your woman has boundaries, she's too masculine. She should be feminine, femininity, and if she's not completely submitting and compliant and just soft and all of these things, she's in her masculine energy. She should let you lead to the extent where, yeah, she has boundaries. And then this gets into the really dark stuff where it'll be like, so one of these guys supposedly was talking, and I don't know how much of what they say is true, I fucking hope they're lying, that his wife is not allowed to have boundaries in their relationship because that's masculine and that would like put him off. So she's not allowed to have boundaries in their marriage, and that up to and including sex as well. Like, she's not allowed to have boundaries, which is really gross. And can't see how that wouldn't be traumatizing. But okay. I just can't believe that, like, the lack of, like, disrespect you've got to have for a partner. Like, you're to not even... She's not allowed to... You don't even care what she... Okay. Wow.
I also just want to say something that really disturbs me a lot is in a lot of these spiritual communities now online, or, like, esoteric stuff, which I've always been interested in. And I really like thinking about masculine and feminine, like, terms of spiritual concepts. It's just interesting to me. But you see in loads of these communities now, a lot of this manosphere rhetoric is seeping in. So it becomes this really predatory, pseudo-spiritual bullshit that's like the kind of creepy, the predatory spiritual stuff. It becomes like that, where it's telling women, oh, be in your divine feminine. But to the point, but then you shouldn't have boundaries. You shouldn't have, it's like the opposite, by the way, of what I think, like, spirituality should be in terms of taking responsibility for yourself, being, like, having sovereign over yourself, being empowered. All of these things, this is preaching the opposite of that, of giving your power away. And specifically to women, oh, queen, be in your divine feminine, don't have boundaries, let a man lead and tell you what you need to do. And, the manosphere bullshit, the harmful shit of women don't have fucking boundaries is going into those communities now, in some of them. And it's really bloody disturbing. But that's really seeping into a lot of New Age stuff and telling women that it's masculine now to be empowered or have boundaries. Which, by the way, in terms of people who are claiming to be really spiritual and esoteric, shows a complete bloody lack of understanding of spiritual concepts or of mythology or archetypes. Like, the idea that there's no archetypes of feminine power, feminine boundaries, of that it's all like softness and all. And don't get me wrong, I love all that, and I think that is very feminine. But that's the only archetype of feminine strength, that women are never, that there's never examples in mythology, history, or spirituality of women being called to, that women can't be ferocious. That's not a part of femininity as well. That is some superficial, ignorant shite. So I think that's why people get annoyed with me sometimes when I say I like femininity and I like the women are feminine. They read that as, oh, you're saying women are weak and shouldn't have boundaries. No, I'm not saying that. That's what other people are saying. I've never claimed that what femininity was. I think it's stupid to claim that, because women have to, going through the pain of childbirth, and especially in the past, of risking your health, your life, to bring children into this world that you have to do alone. And then to be a mother and to protect your children with your life, that I don't think that there's something inherently ingrained in women, that there's strength there. Of course there's strength in that. Of course, but to suggest that it's just all weakness, femininity and softness, that's I think that's ridiculous to claim that, because you can't be a good mother, actually, if you're pathetic. So I'm not the one saying femininity is pathetic.
Hi. Are you tortured by never knowing what happened to the unreleased scripts from my unfinished video series, like parts 2 and 3 from my review of Netflix's Winx? Are kept awake at night, pondering what mysteries the 30 minutes I cut from my Rolo video could hold. 30 key minutes where I addressed his unhinged rant that it's impossible for women to have heroes' journeys or be good protagonists. Did you enjoy channel videos like I become a narcissist, I declare war on mosquitoes, and of course, the classic, I talk and 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 talk? If the answer to any of those questions is yes, then joining my online cult could be the right choice for you. That's right. Over at The Authentic Observer on Patreon, you'll get access to unreleased scripts from videos I never uploaded, the cut sections from longer videos, if there are any, and hours of unedited rambles. I talk about everything, like how important mood is in storytelling and the difference, if any, between masculine and feminine points of view in writing. Or a video discussing the poetry of some of my patrons. Or that time Fresh and Fit had a proud grapist on their podcast. Remember Scientology? Old news. The Authentic Observer is the hip new cult on the block. All the cool kids are signing up. You do want to be cool, don't you? There are so many options to choose from. Our entry-level tier, Skirts and Stockings, is a great choice for beginners. Overgrown Harry Potter kids may feel more at home as a devoted follower of ACES. And for the alpha males amongst you, the woodshed could be just what you need. Just don't let Rolo see you. No one knows what he does to the men he catches. The Authentic Observer cult operates on an honesty system. All tiers have the same access to content, the idea being to support the channel and the content produced here at whatever level you feel appropriate. At the moment, I don't take sponsorships, so if you value the content on this channel and would like to support me, that's where to do it. Link down below in the description box. So if, like myself, you enjoy listening to the sound of my voice, hop on over to Patreon for an offer you don't want to miss. Join a cult today! My point is that this is where some of this mentality goes, is this kind of belief system that I think is becoming more and more of a belief system. There's this weird contradiction now in the culture, actually, where on the surface level, it's very much like female empowerment, feminism, women, independent, like there's an overabundance and kind of that on the surface. And then also there's this tension with what's becoming more and more of a narrative as well is the 50 Shades of Grey thing. The popularity of that, well, women just want to be controlled and dominated completely and they don't want it. Then there's this weird contradiction. The problem with this is that people are pointing to this and then saying, well, this proves that feminism was completely a mistake and women should not have been allowed rights or the vote. Because look what happens, you see? It's their inherent nature coming out. They do actually just want to be controlled and they don't like the fact that they have rights now. They say they do, but they don't. And look what's coming out in unconscious ways, and it's coming out in sexuality, and it's coming out in this way where they're showing that they actually do want to be subservient to men and the culture is a lie. And then this undercurrent is how it really is. And the stories show this. And then they go really far with this mentality, these men who are kind of, all these people who believe in this and going, yeah, this is what this proves, you see. And let's take it to the complete extreme point where actually women don't want boundaries at all. They shouldn't have boundaries. That's not what femininity is. That's not what being a woman is. And actually what all women want is really violent, degrading stuff and control and complete dominance. And that's what they want, and you better not let them have any boundaries or say anything or disagree because they're happiest just, I don't know, as sex robots, like sex dolls, that's kind of like passive, mindless, soulless. But there is a tension and it's becoming more and more recognized in the culture now. This is what I'm saying. So in God, I haven't scripted this, so I don't have to talk about this. In like dating, in like the culture, which is all girl boss, bitch babe, go for it, strong independent woman, you've got that, and then on the other hand, what's becoming more, people are like becoming more of a thing in the culture that people are talking about more, that's become more of a thing is, well, women are really into this stuff. Have you read 50 Shades of Grey? This is women. This is, yeah, they, that's also at the same time, they're growing, like, to, I don't know where I'm going with this. I'm going somewhere with this. And I'm interested in, okay, the reason I want to talk about this is because, like, what do all these things tell us? Well, they've got to tell us something. I just think people are interpreting them wrong a lot of the time. Because also, I know of a lot of women, here's the thing as well, like, I think a lot of this can be damaging in a lot of ways, because I've spoken to women and come across women, like, so a lot of subscribers of mine who ask, like, they'll be, cause over on, if you want to join my Patreon, you can, because I sometimes, like, answer their questions or, like, see comments and have kind of conversations. So I've heard from a few of my female supporters on Patreon to kind of talk about that, like, and not just that, like, on YouTube as well, like, or, like, I'll hear from women, young women, it's always young women, I will hear from women who, this has given them, like, an identity crisis, because on one level, they know that it is not true. They know that it is not true that they want to be subservient to a man. They know that it is not true that they have no dignity. They know that it is not true that they are inherently inferior. And at the same time, it's like, it's kind of like what toxic aspects of extreme feminism did to men, where it's making them believe horrible things about themselves and giving them, and, like, fucking with their heads. Telling them, like, you're inherently evil, you're inherently bad, and that's not good either. But it's, like, there are loads of young women who are, like, who I hear from, who will tell me, oh, I believed about myself for so long that, like, but that basically it kind of gave them an identity crisis of, well, people are telling me that women are all these things. Oh, hang on, I am attracted to a man who's physically stronger than me. Oh my God, does that mean I must be inherently inferior? Or, oh wow, I am attracted to a more masculine guy. Or, I kind of like it when a man takes charge a little bit. Oh my God, does that mean I'm just this, like... And it creates this really horrible, self-hating disgust of themselves, in themselves. Or, like, they'll think, well, I like certain aspects of these things. I don't want to be abused and, like, all of this. But, oh my God, because I like a stronger guy, or like this. Does this mean that this is all true? What they're saying about me? Because this one thing that this man who said that women are naturally just submissive and completely obedient. Well, this one thing he said was true. So is everything he says true? Because I get it, and I get the identity crisis as well, and, like, on a personal level as well, that resonates with me. And it's not, and it infuriates me because I also know it's not true. I don't like how they're taking certain things and using it to say that this is how women are. And there's something as well in wanting to, there's an aspect of that kind of culture where there's something really, like, hating almost about women or the feminine, or wanting to, they really, like, something that dislikes femininity. There's this kind of nasty, like, I want to ruin that. I want to degrade that. I want, like, she needs to know her place. She needs, like, kind of conquering, but not, oh God, I don't want to get too much into it, but there's, like, probably, like, more healthy and unhealthy offshoots of that attitude. Because, again, people are going to say, are you trying to demonize men and male sexuality for, like, being a bit possessive, or, like, no, and there's different, like, oh, this is too complicated to think. I feel like I really shouldn't have waded into this swamp of a topic right now when I haven't scripted anything and I'm not prepared. Okay, just know that I'm not fully explaining this, but as best of my ability, I'm trying to get across some ideas. And not just because I don't think it's a good thing to tell men about how women are and what women want, but it's really fucking with the heads of young women. And I know that because I hear from them. And because it can, like, and I feel like I'm very strong in my beliefs. When someone tells you something enough, and I don't believe it, but you're like, oh, like, it seeps in a little bit. Like, the unconscious kind of, I don't want to say self-hatred because I don't hate myself, but it seeps in, the kind of, those kinds of narratives that if people are constantly saying things enough, you're hearing enough. And it's not good. So I've been thinking about that a lot. And I suppose this is where this video has come from, even though it was supposed to just be a review of the Hunger Games. Wow, I managed to go. I think I should deserve an award for how I can take something and just talk about something completely that you would not think would, and make that a whole thing. Did that sentence make sense? You know what I mean? I deserve a medal. Is there an award for that? Because I should get it. So because there is a certain level of truth to some of the things they're saying, then it's making people believe that all of it is true, or the way they're interpreting it is true. Does this make sense? And I think there's several reasons why things like, again, I'm going to just keep saying that 50 Shades of Grey is popular. Some people will use the argument that a lot of violent, degrading stuff is just from pornography and women are only doing it because that's what men want. And then other people will use the argument that, well, no, women actually are into that themselves, but all women, every woman. People have different reasons, but people have different reasons for why this is a thing. People say, oh, it's just human instinct. That's how it is. A friend of mine, she's of the opinion that the reason this kind of thing is so popular partly is because, like, the 50 Shades of Grey thing is so popular is because women don't want to stress or have to think about things, and it's just that aspect that's appealing of not having to think about it. I think there's probably truth to that. Of, like, being able to relax, I think. She is more of that school of thought than women want to be hurt.
As I go along in this part of the video, I'll be playing clips from this video, which I will link down below, and I really urge you all to go and check it out. It's a really, really good video that offers a different, interesting perspective. But the first clip I'm going to play is about the assumptions people make based on why things like this are popular in the culture. So the point I'm trying to get at, and that annoys me, is that a lot of people, mostly men, will take evidence of things like 50 Shades of Grey or women's romances that they haven't read, they don't know what actually happens in them, like I went through earlier in this video, and they will use that and say, this tells us this, and this about women. And most of the conclusions they draw that it tells them, supposedly, about women are not very good things. Like women are naturally subservient, obedient, submissive, like want to just be dominated, control, pick whatever, however you want to phrase it. Or they'll say this is female nature because of this. They'll draw these conclusions, which is hugely ironic coming from a group of men claiming to be 100% scientific and science-backed. It's not. Most of what I've seen out of the RedPill, honestly, is pseudoscience. Yeah, sure, there are some people who are grounded and genuine and actually fact-based, but a lot of you aren't. And I just want to play this clip because, again, I think this is quite good. This video, I'll play clips throughout, but he stresses the importance of you can't just make things up. If you're gonna, if you have a theory, it's still just a theory. And there could be a multitude of reasons of why this is a thing. So this is the point I'm trying to make, and he just puts it perfectly. So I'm going to play this here.
So do women enjoy rough sex? I think it is obvious, it is clear that this is a place where women can go. A lot of women can access that part of their sexuality, and they will enjoy it. It is important to remember that this is a part of female sexuality. Still, it's quite clear that a lot of women have that in them to enjoy that kind of sex. It's kind of a place they can access in themselves. It's clearly something ancient, something that is quite primal and primitive in that way, that has roots. Why it has developed, there are a lot of people online who will tell you exactly why women love rough sex, because it's about, this evolution or that evolution. It's important to remember these are all just opinions and assumptions. There is an actual science to evolution. Basically, you need to show why some kind of evolutionary adaptation gave you an evolutionary advantage. There are criteria that need to be satisfied scientifically to prove that that was the cause of this effect. Yeah, it's all very good to have beautiful theories about it that make sense. You can like smoke a good joint and have an epiphany why women love rough sex, and it will make total sense to you. But it actually has to be proven, in evolutionary science, that is actually the reason for it. So you've got to be careful with these theories that people are proposing when they're so sure on YouTube why women want rough sex scientifically. That it's because, they really want to be treated rough because it shows them that the man is a good provider or whatever. You could put forward another theory just as easily, which would make even more sense. And you could say that, the reason that women enjoy rough sex is because until 100 years ago, they were pretty much if you think about what sex was for women, we often forget this. We think about this female sexuality as developing, in this really pleasurable experience. But let's think about, what sex was until 100 years ago for women. If we don't consider how many women were, constantly in the position of being absolutely, in somebody's control, somebody in authority in all sorts of different contexts. And in every woman's lifetime, there would be like 5 invading armies going through her village, right? Maybe not 100 years ago, but certainly, from 500 years ago and all the way back until the beginning of time. It would also be sensible that, there was some kind of evolutionary adaptation that would allow a woman to enjoy some of it because it was happening all the time, like some kind of a physiological Stockholm syndrome, I'm not saying that is what happened. Nobody knows. I'm just saying, you can put forward all sorts of theories and, that would make sense. And if we take this theory, well, then things appear a lot more kind of, tragic, don't they? So the objective, balanced, reasonable look at rough sex would be that it's one kind of sex out of many different kinds of sex that a woman might like. And some women like going to that place, some women don't, some women like it sometimes, etc., right? Just one of different kinds of sex. But that is, of course, not what is happening here. There's this whole massive distortion and misrepresentation that this is mostly the kind of sex that women want to have. Things become really problematic when we misrepresent how significant something is, how much value it gives, what is the actual benefit of it. So to the extent that rough sex can be enjoyed for a thrill, for fun, absolutely, but it has been taken out of all proportions. And this is mostly, I think, more of a cultural phenomenon more than anything. So one of the harmful ideas that are spreading really wide at the moment is that generally women love rough sex. It's essential for you to be a lover because that's what women want, even if they don't tell you, because it's instinctive, it's natural, it's something like what a real woman wants from a real man. So that kind of narrative is, really harmful. It's toxic. It's normally spread by, very particular circles that we can argue doesn't have the best knowledge of women or the best connection with women. And this is an ideology that serves their agenda, but it is spreading really wide. The reality is, that we need to remember is that it is a spectrum. Some women are into rough sex. Some women are not into rough sex. They detest it. Some women are somewhere in the middle, probably the majority.
I'm going to suggest this video. I'm going to put it up. Just specifically, actually, I'll tell you who it's specifically for. I think probably anyone should watch it. I think in all the time that I've watched, I've seen loads of videos of men telling other men or women what women want. I've never come across a man who I think has understood women as well as this guy's got it. I went, oh shit, so there's one about trauma specifically where he was, I think it was, where he was talking. I was like, how does he know this? How is he so, kind of articulating things that I need to be true? But yeah, anyway. But I hadn't really consciously thought about. The main reason I'm going to recommend that video, there's a few of them, but the main reason I'm going to recommend them is for young women, because I know a lot of them watch me, it's for young women who are having an identity crisis of self-hatred or being told or starting to believe that, or knowing that they're not inferior and they don't want to be controlled, but then being confused and being told that they kind of are and thinking, but I'm confused, but if I'm attracted to a stronger man, is that true? Is that what that means? And what does this tell me about myself? What does this aspect of my psyche tell me about myself? The fact that I'm drawn to this on a subconscious biological level, does that mean that this about me? I feel like if that's where you are, I feel like you should just watch some of those videos because I think it might help you. But in essence, I won't. You have to watch. I think you should watch the video to understand what he's saying. But what he's basically, his conclusion after a long time of working with women. I'm actually going to cut myself off and let him explain it in his own words. Like I said, I've decided to play a lot of this clip because he puts it so well. I'm just gonna let him speak for himself. Please do though go and check out his channel and the full video. Because I cut out a lot. There's a lot more there, a lot more interesting stuff. But I just think it's really important to hear, and for young women in particular. I'm just gonna let him, in his own words. I hope he doesn't mind that I played quite a lot of this video, but it's really, really good.
Rough sex is definitely not the most powerful experience that women can have. I know this from experience of working with women. Rough sex, in my opinion, is kind of low value sex. It doesn't have that much for a woman. It will feel like a thrill. It will get her out of her head. So she will lose herself in the moment, which women find very valuable because, they pathologically suffer from not being able to be in the moment. I think we need to ask ourselves more, what do certain kinds of sex actually give to us? What value they have for us in our life? Because we can like something might feel good, but it's just not enough to consider that, because lots of things feel good, drugs, junk food, crap food, empty TV watching, social media addiction. So from that perspective, having fun with, sexual aggression and violence and sex, can be thrilling, but, we would struggle to find much further value in it for yourself, for your relationship, for your energy. There are kinds of sex that are for women far more impactful, far more powerful. So the loving part of the spectrum of sex is really, really powerful, far more powerful. It makes total sense if you think about it, all the neurological and emotional influence that you get from it. So this is a part that we forget, that we think that women love rough sex, but which is the part that we are feeding? Would it be still correct to say that women love rough sex above everything else if they had a really powerful experience of loving sex, and if that was consistent, and if we nurtured that part, we fed that part, the woman was more conditioned to it, and then she had an authentic experience with it to the same extent that she has an authentic experience with rough sex. Now, I've actually taken a lot of people on that journey, women, from that place where they had affinity with rough sex because they come from this culture, from this environment, and I help them to develop a loving sex life with their partners. And there is another really important consideration in this whole debate about rough sex and about sexuality in general. Actually, I have always found that sex is always explained to us by mainstream narratives and most people in this field, like it is some kind of a biological system that you don't have any control over. You just have to comply with how it works. It works the way it works because it needed to work like this in the cave times, and we need to carry on making it work in the same way as it did in the cave times. I don't think sexuality is a fully autonomous function like nutrition or something that you completely have no control over once it is in your body. I think a sexual experience, if you wish it to be, is a very conscious experience, and you can create whatever you want out of it, and people do. There are many kinds of sex that people are having now that they were not doing in the cave times. So I think a very important question in sex is, what do you actually want to feel in sex? What do you want to create? And not trying to tap into some kind of a primitive biological response. So it's a bit like saying that for me as a man, I can tap into a place where I'm a killer, because that is also a really primitive core function that is probably a part of us, and it's probably true that there is somewhere there a killer in every man that will come out if pushed. Now, does it mean that I need to, be tapping into a killer now in my daily life? The same can be said in this issue of rough sex for women. So they can tap into it, so it will work for them. But is it what women really want to do? So rough sex is by far not the woman's greatest sexuality. And I actually find it quite tragic, more than anything, that it is becoming redefined as the woman's greatest experience. I think that's a really tragic turn in our sex culture. Again, I'm not saying that women don't enjoy rough sex. Of course, some women enjoy it, and some women enjoy it some of the time. But I think a lot of what you're seeing now is quite inauthentic, that women are leaning into rough sex not for authentic reasons, and that generally it is not authentically represented how much women are really into rough sex. Women are generally in a crisis about their sexuality. Our culture doesn't understand how to access female sexuality deeply, how to really bring out the sexual energies. Women struggle to connect with their bodies. They struggle to feel enough in their bodies. They struggle to connect with sex. They struggle to enjoy sex. Now, I'm not saying it's total zero. Women are managing to different extents. But there's a lot of coping going on. Rough sex is basically like a brute force approach. If you're given it if you shake it violently, then you'll feel something in the world where you're struggling to feel something. Loving part of sex, is really not working for women because it is really misunderstood and people don't really know the know-how to reach that most powerful part of the spectrum for women. So it's completely kind of out of reach. There is the boring, monotonous sex, and then there is, the extreme, intense practices, which are always preferable to the boring, monotonous sex, because at least they feel of something. So for a lot of women, this has become, a coping thing to at least feel something. Rough sex is basically like a defibrillator on female sexuality at the moment. So women themselves increasingly are feeling that they need rough sex to feel something. You also have to keep in mind that people often think about sexuality as something like, static. This is your makeup and this is what I'm into. In reality, that's quite an idealized view. It would be wonderful if people were natural and authentic in their sexuality. But I think most of the time, at the moment, people act in sexuality more from a conditioned place, what they were exposed to, what they were conditioned to, what was fed, and also from a lot of external influence. I think actually a lot of sex is not coming from that authentic place. And I think rough sex, so I think it's very much a cultural and media phenomenon that has been imposed on people more and more over the last, 10, 20 years. So it's a very strange positioning. Are women into rough sex? Do they enjoy it? Well, yeah, but that is not the question. The question is, are they having all the other kinds of sex that they could be enjoying as well? And they could be enjoying even more. Are they developing into those areas of their sexuality that could be more fulfilling for them, especially the younger women? I get a lot of comments from younger men who are dating younger women, and they are saying that, all women seem to be into rough sex. This generation of women from early 30s below, I call them the post-apocalyptic generation. They never knew the world before porn. And these women have only had this kind of porn sex imposed on them. So their whole sexuality was formed, being conditioned to the porn tastes of men. Porn famously doesn't work very well for women. There are some women who get into it, but generally speaking, it is not concerned with, how the woman's body works. It is concerned in showing the guy, what he likes to see. What a lot of these young men are not aware of is that a very big proportion of these women, they don't enjoy sex at all. And you would never be able to tell by looking at her. They have got used to acting, to performing, but they're not feeling anything in sex. They're not enjoying it. They can't connect with it. That's epidemic in this younger generation of women. But will this woman tell you that she loves rough sex? Maybe. But, how much of self-created reality is that? So a lot of it is a cultural phenomenon. People often think of rough sex as expressing some kind of like a primal, natural thing. I think it is very much a cultural phenomenon, a social phenomenon that has happened recently. And people just believe everybody about rough sex. And these ideas, that they spread very easily because they serve particular agendas. They serve, the algorithms, the popularity. Everybody gets influenced by them. So a lot of it is not authentic, but we can expect that the further we go, the more it will appear that rough sex is really significant and really important because everybody is consuming that media that is conditioning them. And then they're acting in that way. And then it seems like, the reality is confirmed for you. I was there. I was working with people in my field in sexuality for the last 20 years. I could see these changes. I could see how things are very different now than they were then. I was there when 50 Shades came out. I could see the reasons for it. People think it's because, some kind of a really core need in women was discovered. I think 50 Shades became popular because people were just so bored. Sex had gone completely flat. Everybody was just doing that really basic, boring routine. Then, this idea of BDSM was just like something interesting to do, something new. That's all it was, in my opinion. Okay, then it's pulled the whole BDSM into the mainstream much more. And now it's like probably like, the main part of sexuality that you are supposed to have. Who knows if at that point there was a different pathway that didn't go that way, that there was something else offered to women that was powerfully loving and nourishing in a different way, not in the kinky way. Who knows where that could have gone, if that was also interesting and fulfilling for women at that time and there was a practice for it. But it didn't. It went that way and now we are where we are. I think it is the same with rough sex. It is what we are going to feed, what is going to develop more. I think women and men are going to lose out from the sex world dominated by rough sex. I think it's going to be a very impoverished world for both men and women, not just for women, because, what they're getting out of rough sex is peanuts compared to what they could be getting out of really powerful loving sex, but also for men to basically be lovers who are mostly able to treat a woman's body aggressively and violently and not lovingly. I think for their soul, for their heart, it's also going to have an effect. For me, like even just taking off my professional hat off for a moment and just personally as a human being, I just find it really sad that our intimate relationships, our sexual relationships are being redefined as the consistent practice of aggression and violence to each other's bodies. Like that is the framework now. I don't have any problem with it being a part of sex, some place that people like to go sometimes because, it's interesting too. But for us to redefine generally sexual relationships with people that we love as primarily a practice of aggression and violence through the body, I just find this really tragic. I understand that it's enjoyable. I just think that as one of the alternative realities that we could have chosen, this is pretty sad because none of it exists in a vacuum. You are what you eat. So all of these are substances. This is the time that we are choosing to spend with each other. This focus on rough sex, the more it is going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy. The easier it is going to be to say that, well, women are all into rough sex. Well, of course they are, because that is all they keep hearing about, that this is what they're supposed to be doing. That's all they've been getting. There's nothing else that works for them because, nothing else has been tried or nothing else, has been tried well. They've been conditioned to it. They've been influenced by all the media around them, that this is their greatest experience. Of course, they will come across that they're into it. And women themselves will be none the wiser that there was an alternative reality possible for them.
So I'm just going to leave that clip there as some food for thought, whether you agree, disagree. I think it's just an important perspective to have because I don't hear that perspective represented amidst everyone talking about all this stuff and what it says about women. This is just a unique perspective and a fairly valid one, seeing as this isn't just a randomer again. He speaks to women all the time and seems to know what he's talking about in regards to that. So I think that's an interesting perspective to add to this. To add to the conversation, to add to the debate. And I know I played a lot of that video, but I think it was all really interesting and really, important. But there's still more of that video, so I urge you all to go and watch it. I'll link it down below, or other videos, because it's just a really interesting perspective and an important one. And But anyway, this is all, like I said, and like he even said at the beginning, a lot of this is all opinions, and I suppose there's a lot of answers that no one really knows a lot of questions no one really knows the answers to, but the problem comes in when people are saying this is this definitely 100% and this is what this says about women. And I hear so many people in the manosphere or manosphere adjacent spaces saying that. Andrew Tate says that, Justin Waller, people, all of these guys, and use it to then say certain things about women when they don't know. There's lots of different possibilities and perspectives. So if you're going to have a conversation, include them.
Well, I was talking to my friend, and she agreed with me. I said, I don't think I've ever heard a man be able to so accurately articulate, like, what it is, like, the thoughts of a woman, or, anyway. I don't think I've ever come across a man who understands women so well. That was what we were talking about, and she agreed.
The most embarrassing thing about the red pill is that one of your biggest icons, Myron from Fresh and Fit, his viral moment of saying, quote, "there is no point in the female orgasm," and that it doesn't matter whether she enjoys it or not, which I think, again, that's a hilarious clip, and I think as soon as he said that, he realised how bad it made him look, and tried to backtrack so hard, because it's not exactly, I feel like if you're trying to get loads of women, I mean, it's probably not what you want to be known for, is it, really? As like, it's kind of the opposite, isn't it? If you're going for the alpha Chad thing, I'm so slick with the ladies, you probably want to get across the opposite message, that women are going to have a good time with you, and he seems to be telling us, broadcasting loud and clear, the exact opposite. That is kind of, that's interesting, that's part of that in the
in the red pill dating advice, I would say this channel is probably better. If those are your options, Myron, doesn't matter if she has a good time or not, what's his name, or some better advice. I just think some people are getting really bad advice that is probably not going to endear them to women. So that's my 2 cents on the matter.
I know that there are lots of young girls, specifically, who I feel like will breathe a sigh of relief when they hear some of what he's saying and go, okay, I'm not a piece of rubbish. Because I think a lot of them feel like that because certain things have been told. But, you know, whether he's right or not, whether he's true or not, this is just one guy's opinion, professional opinion, but it's just one guy's opinion. But whether he's right or not, I think it's worth bringing this forward to attention, talking about this topic in this video, just to offer yet another point of view of why I think it's just so, at best, jumping to conclusions without sufficient evidence, and at worst, just plain wrong to say, this is women's fiction, this is what women find attractive, this seems to be what women are into, therefore it tells us all of these things about women and their personalities and their characters and how they are, and what they like, and I think you, and maybe you're all right, maybe you're all correct, but it's at least worth considering the multitude of other possibilities there could be for why some of these things exist, is what I'm trying to say. So that would be my rebuttal and counter to the people who say, oh, these things exist, therefore means this about women. And I'm not trying to demonize people who are into that, whatever, like, I'm not really not, but I'm just saying, I think it's silly to pretend that, like, but there are some people, like, that it's messing with their minds. So, yeah, whatever. God, so after that tangent of unscripted tangent, going back to my script of the video, back to the Hunger Games. So I was talking about, before I went off on that tangent, female power fantasies. It could be one of the reasons why these stories exist. You know, that you could turn something dangerous into something that won't hurt you, but will instead protect you. Appealing and reassuring to women subconsciously could come out in stories. That could be one thing, you know. So all those reasons I mentioned, the ego trip power fantasy, the rebellious thing, all of that could be potential reasons for why these things are popular. And having said all of that, oh, and the fix him, I can fix him. That's the big one. I can fix him. Yeah, and you can't, darling, you can't fix him. Babe, you can't fix him. So having said all of that, so I'm saying those could be reasons why these things are popular, other than women just want to be abused. And even though all that's true, having said all of that, I also still think that it is probably a bad thing to signal to teenage girls that violent men are actually just hurting on the inside, and he only did it because he loves you so much. Don't you understand? That it just shows the depth of his emotion and how far he's willing to go because he cares. And if you just show him enough compassion, you can fix him. You can't fix him, you don't want to be fixed. You don't want to be fixed. And it's not your job. It's not your job to fix him. The borderline assaulting scenes, are not always, by the way, but they will sometimes come up in these kinds of things. And in YA fiction, there's a lot of, like, ignoring consent, shall we say. People say it. But then, like, that's in YA fiction a lot, but also you sometimes get that in women's romances. And people say that, well, that means women, they want to be R-worded. They want to be, that's what they want. That's what they want. They want force. That's what women want, don't you know? Don't you know? Because there was a scene in this book where he didn't listen to her, and he was very forceful, and that means women like that. One of my takes on that, I just want to say this, because I'll bring that, we'll say it again, use that as another reason for why women deserve all the bad things in the world. I think that's probably a lot more about, again, being desired. It's not in reality. But I would say probably the main appeal of that would be being so desirable that he just can't help himself. And of course, how that translates in reality, that's definitely not a good, I really don't think, maybe don't do that. I don't think women are going to like that. I don't think she'll like that if you do that. No, bad idea. But I'm saying the reason I think that will come up in fiction is not because that women want that to happen to them. I would say it's probably again a little bit of, which sounds counterintuitive, but I think probably a power fantasy again, of I'm so desirable that he'll do anything. He'll do anything. He's not even going to listen because he can't control himself around me. But I don't think that's real life, and I think maybe she won't be happy with you if you do that, and you'll probably end up in prison. Hello, it's me, the final editor. The video that has been produced was not the video that I intended to produce, so it's lacking a little in structure. So to further kind of explain and summarize, so the first thing I want to mention is a friend of mine sent me these from a blog. I'm going to read some screenshots from this blog post because I think it further argues some of the things that I was saying, and again, I didn't see this till afterwards. I will link the full post down below. I'll ask her for that link if she can find it again. If I can find it, I'll link it. And also I will link her blog as well, because she's great. She's got loads of great thoughts. She did a great blog article about Barbie. This is different. This is not the person who wrote this blog. The person who wrote this blog, I don't know. But my friend who sent me the screenshots, she also has a blog. And she's very helpful with talking through ideas and talking about a lot of this stuff with. I will link her blog down below as well. So you can check both of them out. But she sent me this and was like, here's some thoughts on the genre. So I'm quoting from these screenshots from this blog that she sent me. So, okay, some of my thoughts about how romance novels are women processing the contradictions of heterosexuality. One of the universal truisms about a romance novel is that the male interest is always going to be a caricature of masculinity. This is true regardless of the context of the romance novel. Mr. Darcy and Christian Grey are the same kind of guy. The romance novel hero is tall, strong, rich or otherwise possessed of high status, emotionally closed off, sexually promiscuous, and low-key a little violent. Different heroes lean more or less into certain traits, and sometimes the tropes are subverted in subtle ways. Sometimes the high-status hero is temporarily embarrassed. Sometimes he's not technically sexually promiscuous, but he still exudes raw sexuality. Sometimes he's the kind of guy who flexes social power instead of physical power, but he's still big and strong and he could be violent if he wanted to. However, the romance novel hero always has a soft side, typically one that only the heroine is privy to. He plays piano, he loves his little sister, he takes care of his sick mum, he secretly dreams of being a father someday, whatever. Meanwhile, the heroine, and this is the important part, is never a caricature of femininity. Not ever. She's usually smart, though perhaps naive, mouthy, highly independent, and a little on the tomboyish side. The traditional interpretation of this is wish fulfillment. Oh, it's a fantasy of the normal girl next door being good enough for this prince among men. And, yeah, sure, that's not an unfair analysis, but it is a shallow one. Break down the traits of that prince among men, and you end up with 3 discrete clusters. Things that are just universally considered attractive. He's tall, rich, and good at sex. Things that are associated with masculinity as a social role. He's emotionally closed off, domineering, and violent. And things that are neither. Aw, he's secretly a softie. Now look at the typical story structure of a romance novel. The 2 characters meet, and they are instantly attracted to each other, but they also very quickly come to dislike each other or find some reason to discount that initial attraction. This is almost always caused by the masculine traits, his snobbishness, his violence, his controlling nature, etc. Then the couple overcomes that for a while, but they are pushed apart again, in a bigger way this time. This big break is usually caused by a conflict between the hero's extreme masculinity and the heroine's lack of feminine submissiveness. He's too controlling and she won't put up with it. He's too emotionally closed off and she refuses to be used sexually without emotional reciprocity. He cares too much about his status or wealth and she won't tolerate being treated as less than. Then, and here's the big part, the man overcomes this and grovels for the woman's forgiveness. His softer side is usually part of the story here, either in his realization that he was wrong or in how he begs for forgiveness. This is a critical part of a romance novel. I want you all to listen really carefully. This is so true. This is what I was getting at earlier. He is brought to his knees, basically, often literally. This is a critical part of a romance novel. It's not a trope that you can subvert or play with very much. It's an integral part of the story structure. The man literally overcomes his masculinity to become a better person. I'm not saying, by the way, that I agree with all the concepts in here, just to be clear, but there are some interesting ideas. So bear with me and I'll say more at the end. Meanwhile, at no point is the woman expected to become more feminine or more submissive or more tolerant of being treated poorly. She has her own character growth, but it is never in the sense of becoming more submissive and feminine. So, just in the bare bones outline, a romance novel is a story of a man who overcomes male socialization and the limitations of the social role of masculinity to become a better person and partner. And that's not even getting into some of the weirder tropes. Romance novels very commonly involve tropes of violence, sexual or otherwise, and dubious consent. The man is always dominant in the bedroom, not always in the full-on BDSM sense, but always in the sense that he is the one taking charge and the woman is the more passive partner. But these scenes are always portrayed as pleasurable or sexy. Even if the woman didn't want it at first, she comes to want it. It's implied by the structure of the story that she really did want it, she just wouldn't admit to herself that she wanted it. If a romance novel is wish fulfillment, it's not in the prince among men hero. It's in this trope right here. This is wish fulfillment in two ways. First, it solves the contradiction between the fact that women do feel sexual desire and the fact that it is extremely culturally taboo for a woman to feel sexual desire. Real sexual desire, not a performance for men. Sex that you didn't want but enjoyed anyway is the perfect solution. All the pleasure, none of the guilt or shame. But it's also wish fulfillment in that it presents a very harsh reality of life for women who are attracted to men. The threat of sexual violence in a relationship, as something that is not scary or traumatic, but desirable and sexy. This is one of the great contradictions of heterosexuality. How can you love someone who hurts you? These stories solve the contradiction by creating a man who can hurt you, but doesn't. He's big, he's strong, he's controlling, he's sexually dominant and possessive, but he doesn't use those things to hurt you, only to bring you pleasure. Sometimes this is actually the big break in the story, and it's literally the thing the man overcomes. And this is what I mean about processing the contradictions. A romance novel is about creating a narrative where all the contradictions of heterosexuality are resolved. What are some of those contradictions? Well, women who are attracted to men typically find features of male sexual dimorphism, like greater size and strength, attractive. But it's that same size and strength that enables men to hurt us like they do. How can you be so attracted to the thing that is the greatest danger to you? You create a man who is big and strong and scary to other people, but secretly a softie with a heart of gold to you. Heterosexual women want sex with men, but women can't allow themselves to want sex. So they create a man who just knows all their secret desires and knows when no means yes. Hetero women want sex with men, but sex with men is also the biggest danger to them. So they create a narrative where that danger exists and is recognised, but is carefully subverted. Sometimes with that no means yes dynamic, but it's often by creating some kind of plot reason why they can't have sex but do it anyway, and that plot reason is symbolic of the danger of heterosexual sex. You know which romance novel is the best example here? Twilight. That metaphor was not remotely subtle. And then, TLDR, the purpose of a romance novel is to answer the question, if man dangerous, why sexy? So when my friend sent me that, she did say that she wasn't a fan of... She felt like there was maybe some dislike of men undertones in that piece, which she wasn't a fan of, potentially casting all men in a negative light, which I can potentially see. I don't want to immediately jump to conclusions that was what the blogger was trying to do. I suppose that would be the least charitable option. Who knows? But just to say that if it did come across like that, like all men bad, I'm not standing by that at all. I don't believe that. However, that makes me think that I'm not entirely barking up the wrong tree with a lot of the ideas I presented, because this is someone else who independently, as I said, I'd not read this blog article, who us independently of each other have come up with similar ideas, particularly the one about the fear being turned into something that you can neutralize, that you can make it not harmful for you. The other really, really interesting thing that was brought up in that blog post that I didn't mention, I forgot to mention, though I have noticed this before, is in the sexuality and being ashamed aspect. So I didn't really touch on that. I was talking more about desire and some other things that could be going on and protection mechanisms and yeah. But I think that is true, that in fiction it heals the contradiction of being able to engage in sexuality, but you not having made the choice to do that, so you're still innocent. And I think that's actually can be quite a real thing. And so I remember in my reviews years ago that I did on the Shadowhunter series, and I vividly remember this, I brought this up as a point, as a criticism of those books. And these were, again, young adult books. So there's a, and I mentioned this in the videos, but I remember there's this whole scenario with the main character, Clary, and there's the bad guy. I think, I apologise if I get some of the characters mixed up. It's been so long since I've read it and reviewed it, but I'm pretty sure it was the bad guy, Sebastian, who is her brother, but she doesn't know it, and he's also evil and a villain. And he's presented as like this dark, dangerous, edgy, dark romantic hero who's still the villain and a bad guy. But it's very clear that he's supposed to be attractive. That's how the novel's written. That's how Cassandra Clare wrote it. That was one of my main criticisms of it. And clearly she wanted to write some kind of titillating scenes of sexual activity with Clary and Sebastian. But she can't do that. Why? Because Clary is the main character, Clary is the heroine, Clary is good. Sebastian is the villain. He's done terrible things. He's killed people. He's bad person. He's evil. He's very evil. She would be betraying her principles, her morals, and the boy she's really in love with if she was to entertain these feelings of desire for Sebastian. It would also ruin her character. She'd be a terrible person. Yeah, because he's evil.
Can I just say, I just had the realization as well that I have actually noticed a male equivalent for this, although obviously it's not through, well, rarely through like force, but I have seen before in movies and TV shows. So for example, a man might be put under a spell. It's like more that kind of thing, like magic. So like he's no longer responsible for his actions or sexual desire towards this woman who's evil because she's bewitched him, she's enchanted him. And you don't only see that in media, but that's like kind of it can be a bit of a narrative as well to absolve him of his sexual desire towards someone unsavory.
But then there was this scene where I think they're in some kind of, it's a fantasy, they're in some kind of fairy club, and then some like kind of drug gets poured down as rain, I think, and it's supposed to make you hypersexual. And I can't remember if they actually kiss then, but there's something going on between them that crosses some lines and that wouldn't be allowed if she wasn't high. She's basically high. But that, I think that scene written, that comes from the same place. Through the character of Clary, it's the desire of the teenage girl reader. Sebastian is the object of desire. But that's not, you can't, he's evil. He's evil and he's bad and he's done horrid things. So you're not allowed to want that. But if Clary, and then by proxy the reader, she's high, she's out of her mind, she can't control herself, something happens, that's okay. She saves her purity, her goodness, and gets both. So I've seen that a few times in romances. I can think of a few other occasions where, and often in fantasy as well, you'll see this, where there'll be some kind of, oh God knows, if it's some werewolf thing, it'll be like some wolf instinct, you know what I mean? It'll be, you go, or if it's fairies, then it'll be some kind of weird potion, or it'll be something that gets rid of all your morals and barriers and just reveals that and you can't help it, and then these things can happen without, and that happens so much in women's fiction that I really think she's got a point with that. So in the case of the Shadowhunter series, yes, that was about Clary, and that was because he was a bad guy, but I think it's deeper than that. I think the reason that happened in the first place and the reason these things happen is because you're not supposed to want sex, you're not supposed to, but then obviously they do, so that's the solution, is non-consent, which, by the way, does not translate into real life at all. That's not, no. Their romance is the idealised version of, if the worst were to happen, it would be like this. And real life, if the worst were to happen, well, it would just be the fucking worst.
In short, this is why this does not translate into real life. In romances, the reality is that the heroine really, really likes the guy. She really likes him. She wants to have sex with him. However, if she does, and especially if she does earlier on, that's breaking her morals somehow. That's not being pure. That's not being seen as distant and out of reach and above and above such things. And that's a lot of the underlying message of a lot of this stuff. She's pure. She wants that, but she doesn't want to make the choice to do that, because if she makes the choice to do that, well, then she's a harlot. There's always that undertone. However, if that choice is taken away from her, well, then she didn't commit any moral wrong. She never decided to be with him,
But it happened anyway, and it was wonderful, and it was glorious, because that's really what she wanted, because she actually really did want to be with that guy, and she really did fancy him, and she really did want to have sex with him, but she didn't have to make that decision. Therefore, she gets the best of both worlds. She gets to experience it, but also not have to make the choice to experience it. Therefore, she remains pure. Does that make sense as to why that doesn't translate into real life? Because in real life, it's hardly ever true that secretly she does really want to with you, and she does really want it, and that it's not about, basically, women want to be assaulted. I don't think that's what it's about. I really don't think that's what it's about. And again, maybe something with being desired so much that you just can't control himself. But again, this is why it's in fantasy, like in a fantasy, in fiction books, because the reason that does not translate into real life is because if she doesn't want you in real life, she doesn't that's not what she wants. She doesn't want, it's not about that. Also, the other thing this is about is that it's a game. It's a conflict between them. I think it's not just about that, but it's also because, as was said in that blog post, the heroine and the hero, they have instant attraction to each other, but then something happens, either because there's some character flaw of his, or whatever it happens to be, she then cannot like him. She pushes him away, says, I want nothing to do with you, you're not, because of it, and pretends to herself as well that she's not attracted to him. She tells him that, because it's a war between them, as I said earlier, it's a battle between them, it's a war between them, they're fighting, and often it's when he then completely, whatever that character flaw is, then grovels before her, only then does she, agree. And if she gives in to her sexuality before that point, he's won, because they're fighting. It's a conflict. So what's got to happen? She's not giving in to him and giving him sexual access. Basically, this is what it's about, and this is why it crosses consensual boundaries, because the heroine and then the reader through the heroine wants to experience that sexuality and sexual desire, but is not allowed to because she's in a battle with the hero. They're in a battle. They're battling. If she gives him sexual access too soon, she's lost. He's won. So the only way for that to happen, really, at that stage, is for him to forcibly do it. And then, because she still hasn't really lost. And when she finally does properly, in a lot of cases, give him sexual access willingly, it's only when, after he's surrendered. He has to surrender, put down his sword, he grovels before her, he gives up. He gives up the battle, and then she goes, okay, now I give you access, because now I haven't lost if I do. Basically, that's the dynamic. That's the dynamic. So the other interesting thing is, as she said in that blog post, and this is so true. First of all, it's funny when people read, they take women's romances when they haven't read them. Again, you need to read them to understand what's going on. But they'll take the concept and say, well, you've got this really dominating man, and the woman's she just must be submitting all the time, and so women want to be really submissive, and they want men to be really dominant. It's like I said at the beginning of this video, I would be inclined to flip that narrative. As in, I'm not saying that women aren't attracted to masculine men. I'm not saying that at all, because that's not true. We all know that's not true. What I'm saying is, and again, this is why I have a problem with associating masculinity with dominance and femininity with submission. I think it doesn't work. It's not true. It's inaccurate. I see masculinity as separate from dominance, and I see femininity as separate from submission. But there's always this is another really true fact. Anyone who's read women's romances, in whatever genre, because there's so many different genres of women's romances, but there is always that moment where he breaks. So if saying that he's dominant and she just gives in to him eventually. No. There's a power struggle, that's what I'm saying. He's really masculine, but she's often not in a lot of ways. She's fiery, even in Pride and Prejudice there's that to some extent. She's contrary and argumentative and, disobedient and all of these things.
Where the fuck have you been? I told you to come straight here. I've had people out combing the streets looking for you.
I'm sorry I don't always do as I'm told. Maybe you just really need someone who obeys every command. I'll never be able to give you that kind of submission and obedience.
And there's this power struggle that goes on between them, and then he breaks. And it's not just a little break. It's so if you want to talk about, women want to be submissive because this is what they desire. They want a man to just dominate them all the time. But he breaks, and he basically completely, often falling to his knees and I was wrong in everything. You were because it's that point where he's often been holding back or been, they've been fighting, he surrenders, basically. That's what I'm trying to say. He surrenders. They're in a war, and they get to a point in the romance novel and he surrenders. He completely, like, if they're, lays down his metaphorical, not just lays down, throws down his metaphorical sword, completely is just like, I surrender. That's true, and this happens again and again.
Don't leave me.
What are you doing? Get up. What are you doing? How can I believe you? I don't even understand your need to dominate.
I'm not a dominant. I'm not. The right term is a sadist. When you left, I swore that I would stop it if that's what it took to get you back. But I'm done with it. You mean more to me than anything else.
I want to believe you. I do, but I can't.
Message me. All of me. All yours.
Read women's romances if you think it's about her giving in to his domination. They're in a war, he's trying to dominate her. There are moments of when he has domination over her, particularly physically, particularly sexually. But there is always breaking point where he is just helpless before, just completely at her mercy. He puts himself at her mercy completely. And then, and only then, does she fully enter into a relationship with him or fully accept him. Or fully, only when he's completely surrendered to her. So if you want to talk about women's romances, meaning that women are inherently submissive to men, you haven't read enough romances. This is also part of the classic I can heal him, I can fix him trope, which is, notoriously fictional, as in never really works in real life. But also I think that can potentially present a problem. Like, I don't know. Let me know what you think about this. Am I looking too far into this? Or what about if you're reading enough romances and you get so ingrained into that pattern recognition of, oh, I know how this works. Like, subconsciously, you're so into that pattern recognition of guy who behaves like this, he'll always break. He'll break and he'll change and he'll... Could that have an effect on you? That you recognize that you're with someone who, like a bad boy, basically, and you're waiting for subconsciously for that point that you've always been taught in the romances is going to happen. He's going to get to that point where he breaks and he changes forever and he's redeemed by your love. Because that doesn't happen in reality. So I also want to say, full disclosure, I'm gonna make a confession here. I know I've talking a lot about reading the books. I have not read 50 Shades of Grey. However, before you go crazy at me, over the years I have seen enough detailed, like 4-hour-long videos of people going through the text and the plot and talking about it and analysing it and criticising it in detail. So I know the story beat, I know the plot, I know a lot of actually the quotes from it, and yeah. And it's exactly as I would expect and follows the formula of a lot of other kind of romances, even though that's erotica really. But and yeah, I enjoy watching hour-long breakdowns and criticisms of books I've never read. I find it very entertaining. So what I noticed though, Elise, I watched her video of, she's done videos I think on a couple of the books in the series, the 50 Shades series, and I watched, I think I've watched both of them, but maybe this was in the second one. But I had this thought while I was watching her video, because as I said, she goes through this kind of the plot and everything. So I just want to talk about this one thing. So there's a scene in 50 Shades of Grey where he hurts her engaged in a sexual act, and I think I don't know exactly what it is. Did he beat her? I think that's what it is. But she's crying and he doesn't stop, and it's quite disturbing. And of course this is all presented as, this is really what women want, because this is kind of in a weird like fantasy kind of sexual dynamic, and it's all a little bit bizarre and messed up. But the thought I had, because she goes on reading the book, you can see the aftermath of this. After he's hurt her, and this might be a kind of a controversial thing to say and bring up, but what I noticed in Elise talking about the books was that, and I'm not saying this is a good or positive thing by any means, but after he had greatly hurt and traumatized her, beaten and traumatized her, the power had shifted to her through guilt. So because she was hurt by him, and often is, I think at several points throughout those books, he is guilty. He's done something wrong and he knows it and he's guilty. And she then becomes, from what I got from seeing her kind of analysis and talk of the book, the thought I had was that in a way, there's a weird sort of power and sympathy in victimhood. And I'm talking in a fictional context of why this could be a wish fulfillment fantasy in a woman's erotic novel. I'm not talking about real life people who are victimized or, okay? In the context of that, there is power in her victimhood because he's guilty and he's bad and he's wrong, and it only emphasizes her goodness and her kindness and her purity. She's just been hurt again and again, and how could he? And because she's so pure and so good and so innocent, he feels even worse, and he, by contrast to her goodness, he's even more torn up inside because he's sick and he's twisted and he's bad and there's something wrong with him, and he's not good enough for her, and that gives her power. So you see, you go from, if this is what I mean with, I think sometimes a masculine framework only sees the physical, that the very, very obvious, not necessarily even just physical, but that very obvious sort of power as power, because he's the one who hurt her. He's the one in control, he's got all the power. But in doing that, in the context of that story, I wonder if there's the reason that could be also appealing to women is the psychological little kick you get out of, yeah, you did hurt me. You did do something wrong. Yeah. And now you owe me, and now look how bad you are compared to me. I'm so good, I'm so pure, and I've been hurt, and this has happened to me, and this has happened to me. I've mentioned in the past that I believe endurance to be a traditionally feminine quality, and you see that a lot in fairy tales and myth. And I think that can be an immensely positive thing. However, I think the shadow side of the positive feminine trait of endurance, the shadow side of that is martyrdom. And I think sometimes that can be a bit of a complex, perhaps, in women, of feeling like, in order to prove my goodness, I have to suffer. I have to endure. I have to endure this mistreatment, and not complain or give myself over to it, and suffer and suffer and suffer to prove that I am good and I am pure, and to prove my worth and my value. And does that make sense? I think there's potentially an element of that to it as well. So in that way, is it necessarily about it? Yeah, it's just far more complicated than surface level shallow talks about women want to submit. It just so is all this stuff. It's an inverted type of power, I think, even though it looks like she's powerless. In some cases, I think, especially in the past and history, the reason why that might be a thing, you might see that sometimes in fiction, because you do sometimes see that dynamic played out again in fiction. I've seen that a few times in romance novels, which is why they get accused of intoxic, because he will do something so heinous to her, often violent, often whatever it happens to be. These are the romance books that get loads of criticism, and I really hate them, but they'll have these scenes that are really actually traumatic and disturbing, sometimes with sexual violence or something really bad, where she's like deeply traumatized and hurt. And that's when, often, not always, because it's different in different stories, but that's often then the point he breaks completely before her. That's often the point where he breaks, because he's hurt her so much or traumatized her so much. The power shifts to her, and he's got no other option except to say, I am at your mercy because of what I have done to you. Forgive me. Let me do. I surrender totally to you. And then she has complete choice about what she wants to do about that. But you see that a lot, I think, when she's hurt in those books, the power shifts to her. And as I said, you really should, the men who want to use these as arguments, you really should read those books with a little more insight. I think try reading them as a power struggle between two people operating on two completely different playing fields of power. If you look at them in that way, rather than as a male power fantasy, which obviously they're not, because they're not written for men, or generally by men, then you might draw some different conclusions. So I'm not convinced, as I say, that in 50 Shades of Grey that the fantasy is necessarily being hurt. I think you could make an argument that it's a power, and again, everyone will have different motivations, so generalising, I suppose. Is it about being hurt, or is it about being seen as vulnerable and as a victim of him, which gives her power over him and control over him. So she is ultimately then, in that ultimate act, whatever it is he does that, and sometimes it'll be they're having this war, they're having this struggle, and he takes it too far and he does something heinous. She's then vulnerable. He's really done something awful. She's the victim, she's vulnerable now. And then all the power goes to her. And she wins. Because vulnerability can be power. And if you've never seen a woman play vulnerable as a power grab, then you don't know enough women. Or you're obtuse. And that's not to say, by the way, that all women do that. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that it's a fairly common toxic feminine behaviour in the way that a bloke getting really aggressive is a toxic masculine behaviour. I suppose depending on the context. But most of us have seen kind of that. So that doesn't mean to say that every woman is, like that. But this is a thing. And I think that the problem is that women know that impulse, but not the unconscious drive behind it. I think it's been driven by power, not by a desire to be subservient or to be hurt. I think it's driven by a desire to be seen as vulnerable. Then you've got him. And of course, that's not to say that women can't be genuinely vulnerable or aren't genuinely vulnerable in a lot of situations. Of course, that's true. But let's not pretend that men don't have a strong reaction to female vulnerability, or that it can't be used for underhand purposes. And, I think men having a strong reaction to female vulnerability is for good reason. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but it can be weaponized. Just to make it even clearer, the ideas I'm trying to get across, as I said earlier in the video, I believe that a lot of these stories, to be honest, are less love stories and more soothing the primal fear of men who want to kill you stories, or who could kill you stories. I think you could make an argument that you could look at these stories in this way. So let's say we go back to tribal times, and there's the biggest guy in the tribe, someone who's brutal, who's vicious, who's got, exactly, like Khal Drogo type, whatever, you get it. So in the same way that perhaps a male fantasy of defeating that guy or making yourself safe from that guy is, I don't know, and I'm guessing here, but maybe you dream about taking him on and managing to kill him and winning one over on him, physically fighting him, and you win. Great. Pretty unrealistic for women, especially back then. Like some Khal Drogo looking guy, you're gonna struggle. You're gonna struggle with killing him. But I think what men don't appreciate is that these love stories are a battle, really. Like I've said, they're a power struggle between her and him. I don't even like calling them love stories, I don't think that's what they are, but these kind of the women's fiction stories, it's a battle between this uber masculine guy and the female heroine protagonist. And I think what men don't appreciate is that it's similar. It echoes perhaps his dream of taking on this guy and winning. The feminine equivalent of that is you can't literally kill him, but perhaps metaphorically you can challenge him, you can overcome him, and you can kill him. Or kill who he was, or kill the threat he poses to you. I think what men don't appreciate is that these stories are the stories really of a battle, of a struggle, and a resolution. It just takes on a different form to yours, but it's also about survival and fear of being hurt and how to overcome this monster. Really, just I suppose in the same way that the male equivalent would be. I think you could make a case for that. So, to conclude, I think basically I'm not saying anything I've said in this video is 100% correct. I think there's quite a strong basis for a lot of it. But basically, I hope the impression you're getting from this and this video is that it's a far more complex thing than we're led to believe. I think it's far more complex because I think women are really complex and contradictory. And a lot of these things are contradictory. And of course, I didn't really go into that in this video, but the fix him, I can heal him, I want to be the healer, I have value in how much I can heal through my goodness. In his, as the fifth shade, it's a great thing, look how pure I am, I'm so vulnerable and pure, but I'm so good, and he's so twisted and evil, and I love him, and he's going, oh, I'm so terrible for you, Anastasia, I'm not good enough for you, you're so good, and I'm so dark and twisted, but you can heal me through your love. There's something in that too. So that's another thing I haven't even touched on. But that's what it's so much more complicated, and the power games at play in these stories are so much more complicated than most people on the internet seem to be giving them credit for. And I think there's so much nuance here and so many more possibilities and options that say a lot more about the female psyche and how women work and what women want and what women desire than the simplistic, ridiculous, whatever, some RedPill guy who hasn't read any of these books says about women. And as I said, still an opinion. I could be wrong on everything. I want everyone's feedback, everyone's opinions actually, but actually just particularly other women, what do you think of this? I would really like, just because, and that's not to say I don't care what men think, I do, but just in this particular, have I explained, because only women are going to be able to tell me this, have I touched on something true that resonates with you? Does it resonate with you? Do you feel like there's any truth in the reasons I said? What do you think? What do you think about the nature of women, the psychological makeup of women, the desires of women, the sexual attraction of women, and this heterosexual women? But I really want to know. I really want to know. Yeah, let me know what resonated, if anything resonated, and what you think. I'm just going to add this in. I'm going to throw this up on the screen. This was a comment left under my last video by Luna, a regular commenter. I don't know if any of this is true. I haven't fact-checked this. But she does add some sources at the end. But I think it's worth adding. Basically, to summarize, you can pause the video and read this if you want to, but basically to summarize, she's saying that people who read romances read at a far higher rate than other people. Basically meaning that while it may seem that romance is so popular because all of these things are selling out massively and it looks like, oh my god, there must be so many women always reading romances because they sell so much. The point is basically it's actually a minority of people, a minority of women, but the people who do read romance read so much romance that it's massively overrepresented or it looks like a huge number of people, whereas actually it's a small number of people just buying so many books all the time, constantly, is kind of the argument there, and that it's a minority of women rather than necessarily representative of large scale what women like in romances, if that makes sense. But pause and read if you wish to. But this does not mean that I am advocating for censorship, by the way. Anyone who's followed my channel for a while will know that I am very anti-censorship. And the problem with banning something based on moral objections is that everyone has different standards for that. But I'm allowed to criticise something and say I think it's bad and a problem without advocating for it to be banned, even though people have accused me of that in the past. People can read and write what they want. As far as I would go in this regard, however, is I think parents should be more aware of what their kids are reading, because genuinely, I think this is a huge problem in the publishing industry. Teens are such a lucrative demographic, and they want to make money, so they don't really care. In my opinion, the publishers, and they'll market really inappropriate things at children and put it in the children's section. It's difficult with teenagers. It's difficult. You can't really control what they read, and I'm undecided on whether you even really should. They need independence, and I think they kind of get their hands on stuff anyway. I don't know how, I don't know about that. But for younger kids especially, who are reading at a higher level, there's so many terrible books to just maybe be aware of. I've been filming for a long time and he's getting upset with me now, because I'm okay. Can I finish the rest of it with you on my knee? You behave yourself. Maybe he'll behave. You are such a baby. Come here. So I'm anti-book banning, anti-censorship. I also think it often doesn't work when parents try to ban bookish children from reading certain things. I think if a kid likes reading, they're going to want to read everything. And I think over-restricting them isn't necessarily good either. And for actual teenagers, some more inappropriate content isn't necessarily bad either, because they're going to be exposed to it anyway. And coddling them from the world isn't good. I just wish it was handled better. I think that's what I'm asking for, and that toxic stuff was actually shown as toxic. It would make sense if this stuff was written by teens for teens, because teens are stupid about toxic behaviours, to be honest. But it isn't. It's written by adults for teens. So the romanticisation of abusive stuff just leaves a really bad taste in my mouth. I think so many YA writers are wildly irresponsible at best and calculatingly cynical at worst, intentionally writing all this toxic stuff just to make money off teen angst. And they should be criticised for that, along with the terrible quality of writing. And I think there's massive problems in the publishing industry and how they just ignore all this wildly inappropriate stuff that would never be allowed in a teen movie, but they can get away with it because it's just a book. Like, maybe a few swear words and kissing is probably as intense as parents think it gets. Like, for if you're, like, under the age of 15. But little do they know that for years, the world of YA literature has been plagued with incest, abuse, assault, toxic controlling partners, coercion, and more. Fun for all the family. Well, literally with the incest stuff. Okay. But, you know, because teenagers are dramatic little shits, so the more intense, the better. It sells and it appeals to them, but that doesn't mean it's good. Kind of like young boys and getting hooked on porn. It appeals to them, obviously. It's wildly successful in that demographic. But it's not really good for them, is it? Like, we know it's fucking terrible for your brain development, especially at a young age. It's actively harming you and changing how your brain works. And I think you can probably draw something of a comparison. Like, and how, I just think, you know, how ethical is it to hook into all that crazy stuff going on in a teenager's brain in order to sell them stuff? Like, I'm sorry, I just increasingly believe that a lot of this is intentionally psychologically targeted to sell to them, a bit like a drug, like hacking their minds and hormones. And I think it's kind of unethical and it's probably giving them all brainworms and warped views on relationships, whether through porn or through terrible books written by Cassandra Clare. This is all just my opinion. This is just my hypothesis. This is my theory that I'm setting forward for why I think some of these things are things. I think that teenagers don't realise that these are power fantasies. They think they are real love stories. And the problem is that these are powerful unconscious drives. Really powerful unconscious drives. And if you're incorrectly interpreting them, I don't think that's healthy. Just realise that it's a power fantasy and not a genuine love fantasy. It's a power fantasy. I think a lot of these stuff. I think it's more about that. In a lot of ways. I think that's why it gets you. I think that's why, especially for teenagers, I think that's why it's lighting everything up in your brain, because it's a power trip. The problem is, if those same feelings that you're getting when you're watching the Twilight that all the kids are into these days, all the Shadowhunters, or the President Snow, if those same feelings that you're getting from that are then tapped into in a relationship, and you think, oh, this is love, when it might just be an unrealistic power trip, or like something addictive about it as well. It's not like, yeah, it's healthy. Like with Justin Waller, like his clear addictions to certain things. Watch my video on that if you want. But like it's just like obsession. It's like it's dopamine. It's the dopamine. It's not, you know, real. So I do get why characters like this, like Coriolanus Snow and Jace Wayland and Edward Cullen, are idolised by teenage girls, as I hope I've explained extensively in this video. I understand the appeal. But real life grown adults, if they're not mentally stunted like Colleen Hoover, harsh, but I've read one of her books and you're not about to convince me it was written by someone with a fully functioning brain. The love interest was called Ryle, and that's not even a real name. Apart from her, most adults know that in real life, people who behave like this probably aren't secret tortured heroes. They're probably future serial killers or abusers, and if they're controlling and selfish, it's not because they're deep and misunderstood. It's because they're controlling and selfish. It's really simple. Like, sometimes what it says on the tin is just what it says on the tin. And just once, I would like to see that kind of behaviour accurately represented in young adult fiction, where it's not romanticised, but fully shown in all of its revolting, selfish glory. That it's not someone a little dark, ooh, enticing, but who deeply cares for you. This is someone who only cares about themselves, and if there's anything about you they admire, it's only the idea of you and what you can do for them. It's obsession. In reality, that dynamic, it's not deep and meaningful and epic. It's painful and selfish and ugly. What is woman? What do women want? What is a woman? That's a controversial question nowadays. Women, what do they want? Who are they? Who are women? What do they look like? Why do they like to be beaten? Do they like, no. Also join my Patreon to support the channel if you would like. It really does help everything that I do here. It really does. I hope, you know, there's interesting content over there to enjoy. There's extra content. There's more interaction. I interact with people. I answer their questions and stuff. But also it like supports this channel because I couldn't focus so much time on this if not for Patreon as well. So if you want to support the channel, because I don't really take sponsorships, that's the way to do it. And here, I'm going to plug it shamelessly. Here's one of the latest video topics we did. Look at that. Scandalous. Sounds interesting, doesn't it? Doesn't it sound interesting? What do I think of that? What's the answer to that question? Well, you have to sign up to the Patreon and watch the video and find out what I said. What did I say? Look at me. Is it the male gaze? Or is it genuine female sexuality? What is the genuine? What do I think of all the things? What do I think of that? Why is Cardi B in the thumbnail? Ooh! And this lady, what am I trying to say with the contrast between those images? Do you want to head on over to Patreon to find out? Okay. I'll stop selling it, but okay. Anyway, thank you everyone very much for watching. I hope you had a lovely Christmas and have a very good Merry New Year. That was the wrong way around. Happy New Year. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas is over. What am I saying? I'm talking too long. My brain has devolved into mush. Hope you had a Merry Christmas. All the best for 2024. Oh my god, it will be 2024. That's crazy. All the best for 2024. Have a fantastic year. I think it's going to be a good year. I have a good feeling about 2024. I think probably I say it every year, but you know what? I have a good feeling about this. Look after yourselves.